Tamiya horror stories. To make it easier on your eyes, this video plays against a black screen, so you can close your eyes, get comfortable, and let the story take over. But don't relax too much, the ending might just catch you off guard. Stay with me until the very last word. The dead man's phone started ringing while I was backing the ambulance out of his driveway. It wasn't loud, just the thin, cheerful marimba sound that came standard on older iPhones, muffled by the black plastic property bag resting on the bench behind me. 3 notes, a pause, then 3 notes again. Through the rearview mirror, I watched the bag tremble against the straps as the phone vibrated inside it. The tow tag we had been told not to use was still sitting unopened on the counter by the airway cabinet. There were several reasonable explanations. A family member calling, an automatic reminder, a number spoofed by a telemarketer. Dead people got calls all the time. Their calendars continued informing them about dentist appointments. Pharmacies sent refill messages, and food delivery apps offered discounts to hands that would never touch a screen again. What bothered me was the name displayed through the cloudy plastic. Graham Vale, that was also the name on the driver's license inside the bag. My name is Daniel Mercer. I was 34 years old then, male, divorced, and 6 years into driving nights for Allegheny Valley Emergency Medical Services, a private ambulance company that covered a ragged patchwork of towns east of Pittsburgh. We handled emergencies when the municipal crews were tied up, interfacility transports nobody else wanted, nursing home falls, psychiatric transfers, and the occasional body removal when the county contractor was short-staffed. I preferred nights because traffic was lighter and supervisors were farther away. That was the reason I gave people anyway. The real reason was that I had stopped sleeping properly after my marriage ended, and sitting awake in an apartment felt worse than getting paid to do it behind a windshield. "Don't answer it," Mara said from the patient compartment. Her voice came through the small pass-through opening behind my right shoulder. I kept 1 foot on the brake. The driveway sloped toward a narrow road bordered by bare sycamores and drainage ditches dark with November rain. The house behind us was a white ranch with green shutters, porch light on, front door open. A sheriff's deputy stood under the awning, speaking to a woman wrapped in a Steelers blanket. Every few seconds, the woman looked toward our ambulance and pressed 1 fist against her mouth. The phone stopped. I waited. It began ringing again. Mara Velez was 29, female, and the paramedic assigned to my truck for the next 12 hours. She had worked with me for almost a year and possessed the uncomfortable habit of noticing what people were trying not to say. She was small, quick-moving, and almost aggressively neat, with dark hair twisted into a bun that remained perfect through cardiac arrests, stair chair carries, and gas station coffee spills. At that moment, she was crouched beside the stretcher, checking the monitor cables, even though the man beneath the sheet had been pronounced before we arrived. "Danny, I'm not answering it. You're staring at it like you're about to. I'm trying to see the screen." "You saw the screen." The ringtone ended again. I shifted into park. Rain ticked lightly against the roof. Somewhere in the house, a dog barked in a steady, exhausted rhythm. The deputy's radio crackled on the porch, followed by a dispatcher's voice warped by static. Mara leaned into the opening. "What name did you see?" I told her. She looked back at the property bag. "No," she said. "That's what it says. Could be his home phone calling his cell. Some kind of medical alert setup. His home phone is mounted on the kitchen wall. You looked. I noticed things. You notice things that support whatever bad idea you already have." That was fair. Mara believed my biggest flaw was curiosity. She was wrong, although curiosity caused more visible damage. My actual flaw was that I hated leaving questions unanswered, because unanswered questions had a way of becoming accusations later. During my divorce, I had learned how easily a missing hour, an unexplained charge, or a half-finished sentence could be shaped into evidence. Since then, I documented everything: mileage, times, names, which doors were locked, which lights were on. It made me a good ambulance driver and an exhausting person to know. The phone rang a third time. This time, Mara unzipped the property bag. The smell inside was ordinary: leather wallet, damp wool, peppermint gum, and the faint medicinal odor of the dead man's clothing. She lifted the phone using a nitrile-gloved hand. The screen was cracked across one corner. The incoming call still read Graham Vale. Mara turned it toward me. "2 phones," I said. There was only one listed on the property sheet. She let it ring until it stopped, then tapped the recent call screen. The incoming number was local, a 412 area code. The contact had been saved without a photograph. "You calling it back?" I asked. "No, you opened the bag to confirm what you saw, and now it's confirmed. And now we reseal the bag." She slid the phone back inside, pulled the zipper closed, and wrote her initials across a fresh evidence seal. Her movements were calm, but she pressed the adhesive strip down twice. The dead man on our stretcher had been found in his recliner by his younger sister. No trauma, no sign of forced entry. 72 years old, history of atrial fibrillation, hypertension, and a previous stroke. The on-call physician had pronounced him by phone after the deputy and first responders confirmed the obvious signs. The county coroner's office had authorized transport to a contracted funeral home in Penn Hills because their removal vehicle was dealing with a multiple fatality wreck on Route 28. Routine, in the way that death becomes routine when people assign it forms. We had been in the house for 31 minutes, long enough to hear the sister explain that Graham had not answered his phone since Tuesday, long enough to move an untouched bowl of hard candy so the stretcher would fit through the hallway, long enough to see the stack of sympathy cards already arranged on the dining room table. That detail had bothered me too. The cards were unopened, still in their envelopes, but they had been lined up beneath a framed photograph of Graham wearing a blue fishing hat. Some bore florist logos. One envelope had "with deepest condolences" printed in silver script across the front. I had assumed they were for somebody else. Families collected grief. Houses stored it. The deputy walked toward my window, bending slightly against the rain. He was a broad man with a pale mustache and the heavy, careful steps of someone whose knees hurt. Officer Raymond Keller was 58, male, and had worked patrol in the county longer than either Mara or I had been licensed. He had the patient manner of an uncle assembling furniture for people he did not particularly like. He knocked twice on the glass. I lowered the window. "You folks good?" "Phone in the property bag kept ringing," I said. Keller looked past me toward the rear compartment. "That a problem?" Caller ID showed the decedent's name. He considered this without changing expression. Rain collected on the brim of his campaign hat. Landline, different number. Probably had a second phone. Only one phone was found. Keller glanced back at the sister on the porch. "You want me to ask her?" Mara appeared at the side door. "Maybe without telling her why." "That would require lying." "Call it tact," Keller sighed, then returned to the house. For a few minutes, nothing happened. The ambulance idled unevenly, making the dashboard tremble. Our unit, Medic 14, was a diesel Ford with more than 200,000 miles on it and a heater that worked best while moving. Warm air smelled faintly of dust and old coffee. The digital clock read 1:47 a.m. Mara climbed into the passenger seat. "We're already behind," she said. "Have another call." "We will." She checked the mobile data terminal mounted between us. The screen showed our status as transporting NON Emergent and our destination as Ralston and Pike Funeral Services, 13 miles away. "Dispatch hasn't asked why we're sitting," I said. "They will." As if summoned, the radio chirped. "Medic 14, confirm en route." I keyed the microphone. "Medic 14, slight delay obtaining patient property information. En route shortly." A pause. "Copy." Mara looked at me. "You said patient. Force of habit. He's not a patient. Everyone in the back is a patient until they're handed off. That is not remotely true. It helps me drive carefully." Outside, Keller spoke with the sister beneath the porch light. She shook her head, then looked directly at us. That was the snap. Before that moment, the ringing phone had been strange in an abstract way. A small technical mistake we could package and label. The sister's reaction made it physical. She lowered the blanket from her shoulders and walked into the rain wearing slippers. Keller followed, reaching for her elbow when she slipped on the wet concrete. Her name was Elise Vale, 64, female, Graham's younger sister and closest living relative. She had the hollow, over-alert expression of someone who had spent hours rehearsing bad possibilities and had just discovered she had not imagined enough of them. Her gray hair hung loose against her cheeks. When she reached my window, she was breathing hard. "Where did you get that phone?" she asked. "From his coat pocket," Mara said. Elise looked at the side door as though she could see through it. "That's not Graham's phone. The identification and wallet were with it," I said. "No, his phone is gone." "What do you mean gone?" "I called it when I arrived. I could hear it ringing somewhere in the house, but then it stopped." We searched the living room. Ray searched the bedroom. Keller raised a hand. I checked the obvious places. We weren't processing a crime scene. Elise ignored him. "Graham's phone has a red case, thick rubber. He dropped it all the time." The phone in the bag had a black case. Mara opened her mouth, then closed it again. I said, "Is there anyone else named Graham who might call him?" "No. Could he have owned a second phone?" "He hated the first one." The dog continued barking inside the house, a short bark two quick ones, over and over. Elise looked back at the doorway. "I need to see him," she said. Keller's face tightened. "Elise, I identified him in the chair, but I need to see him again." Mara stepped out into the rain. "I'm sorry, but we have him secured for transport. You can uncover his face. It would be better to wait until the funeral home." Elise gripped the edge of the ambulance window. Her fingernails were painted pale pink, chipped at the tips. "You don't understand. Graham was supposed to be at the funeral home tonight." Nobody said anything. Diesel engine rattled beneath us. I thought of the sympathy cards lined up on the dining table. Mara spoke carefully. "For a prearrangement appointment." Elise blinked at her. "For Dennis's viewing." "Who's Dennis?" "Our cousin. He died last week." That explained the cards. It did not explain why Graham was supposed to be at a viewing that, according to the clock, would have ended hours ago. Elise seemed to read the next question on my face. "The family had a private prayer after midnight," she said. "Graham said he would meet us there. He called me around 11:30 and said he was already on his way." Keller shifted his weight. "You told me you hadn't heard from him since Tuesday." "I hadn't seen him since Tuesday. I said he wasn't answering me today." "You said." "I know what I said." Her voice cracked sharply enough to wake the dog into a faster rhythm of barking. Mara looked at me through the windshield. The dead man had been cold when we arrived. Fixed lividity along his back and lower arms. Jaw stiff. He had not died after 11:30. Not tonight. Elise whispered, "What number called the phone?" Mara did not answer. "Please." Mara recited the number from memory. Elise's lips parted. "That's the funeral home," she said. The dashboard clock changed to 1:51. A message flashed across the terminal. "Medic 14 destination, requesting ETA." Mara read it, then looked through the pass through toward the covered shape in the back. Keller took off his hat and wiped rain from his forehead. Could be someone at the funeral home using Graham's number as a contact name. Maybe he called them earlier. Then why call his belongings? I asked. "To locate the phone," Mara said. "Whose phone?" She gave me a warning look. The radio chirped again. "Medic 14, Ralston and Pike, advises family is waiting. Confirm 5-minute ETA when close." Elise stepped back from the ambulance. "Family," she said. Keller turned toward her. "Family," she shook her head slowly. "They all left before 1. Mara climbed back into the passenger seat and shut the door. Rainwater darkened her shoulders. She pulled off her gloves and rubbed her palms against her uniform trousers. "We take him to the contracted destination," she said quietly. "We document the phone. We hand everything over. That's procedure." "Yes." Keller stood outside my window. "I can follow you." "You think you need to?" I asked. "No," he said, after a moment. "But I can." Elise hugged the blanket around herself again. "I'm coming." "You shouldn't drive right now," Keller said. "I'm not staying here." The terminal chimed a third time. A new note had appeared beneath the destination. "Funeral home requests crew use rear entrance. Front chapel occupied." I looked at Mara. She looked at Keller. Behind us, from inside the sealed property bag, the phone began to ring again. Same 3 bright notes. Same name on the screen. For the first time, someone answered it, not us. A faint voice came through the plastic from inside the bag, distorted by distance and zipper teeth. "Hello, Mara reached for the side compartment latch. I caught her wrist. The voice spoke again, clearer this time. "Is Daniel driving?" My hand stayed around Mara's wrist longer than it should have. Outside, Keller leaned toward the window. What was that? The line disconnected. The phone went dark. On the terminal, dispatch changed our status without asking. En route. Mara stared at the property bag, then at me. We had 3 choices, although only 2 felt real: open the bag and call the number back, remain at the house until a supervisor or coroner arrived, or follow procedure and take the body to Ralston and Pike, where an unknown family was apparently waiting at nearly 2 in the morning. The radio clicked. Medic 14, confirm movement. My fingers closed around the gearshift. Mara said, "Danny, don't make this decision because it knows your name." I watched the rain slide through the beams of our headlights and disappear into the drainage ditch. Then I shifted the ambulance into drive. The first thing that failed was the radio. We had made it less than half a mile from Graham Vale's house when a burst of static swallowed dispatch in the middle of a sentence. I caught only our unit number and the word route. Then the speaker gave a dry pop and went quiet. I tapped the volume knob. Nothing. "Dead zone?" Mara asked. "Not here." The road ran downhill through a neighborhood of small brick houses and wet lawns, then crossed beneath a set of high voltage lines. I had driven it hundreds of times. Radio reception got scratchy near the creek, but never vanished completely. Behind us, Keller's cruiser followed at a cautious distance, headlights doubled by the rain on my mirrors. Elise sat in his passenger seat, wrapped in the Steeler's blanket. I could see the pale shape of her face whenever they passed under a street lamp. Mara tried her handheld radio. Allegheny Dispatch, Medic 14. Static. She changed channels, tried again, then looked at the signal bars on the mobile data terminal. The terminal still showed us moving on the map. "Cellular connection's fine," she said. "Call them." She took out her phone. 1 bar. The call rang for several seconds, then dropped without connecting. "Try the station." "Already am." The phone in Graham's property bag remained dark. That should have helped. It did not. The concrete problem announced itself 2 minutes later, just as I turned onto Halton Road. A warning tone sounded under the dashboard, not the soft chime for low washer fluid or an open compartment. This was sharper, repeating. The ambulance lost power. The diesel engine kept running, but pressing the accelerator did almost nothing. We slowed from 40 to 25 in the middle of the lane. I switched on the hazard lights and eased us toward the shoulder. "What is it?" Mara asked. "Transmission, maybe." A red symbol flashed on the instrument panel, then another. The steering grew heavy in my hands. Maybe not transmission. There was no real shoulder, only a narrow strip of broken asphalt beside a drainage ditch. I managed to get the right wheels off the travel lane before the engine shuddered hard enough to rattle the airway cabinet. Then it stopped. The heater fan died with it. The sudden reduction in noise was startling. Rain on the roof, hazard relay clicking, patient compartment inverter humming behind us, Graham's stretcher straps creaking slightly as the ambulance settled on its suspension. Keller pulled in behind us, light bar activated but siren off. Blue and red flashes swept across the bare trees and wet utility poles. Mara looked at the dashboard clock. 2. 01 a.m. We're 11 miles out, she said. I know. Funeral home requested 5-minute notice. I know. And we have no radio. I'm aware of the situation, Mara. She turned toward me. I'm stating the situation because you have that look. What look? The one where you decide every problem is a puzzle specifically designed for you. I tried the ignition. The starter clicked once. No crank. I tried again. Stop, she said. I'm checking. You're draining the battery. The battery's not the problem. You don't know that. I did know one thing. Medic 14 had come back from maintenance that afternoon. The work order had mentioned an electrical fault in the auxiliary system, intermittent, but supposedly resolved. I had read it during shift change and signed the acceptance sheet without inspecting the engine compartment because the outgoing crew was waiting for me, and the supervisor had already said the truck was cleared. That was not something I wanted to say aloud. My private fear had never been death itself. Working an ambulance stripped death of its drama quickly. What frightened me was being the person who missed one small, preventable thing, and then having to listen while someone explained how obvious it should have been. A loose strap, an unchecked oxygen bottle, a maintenance note treated like paperwork. My ex-wife used to call it living backward. She said I imagined the investigation before anything had even happened. Now something had happened. Keller came up beside my door, rain running off the clear plastic cover of his uniform jacket. You lose the engine. Electrical failure. You need a tow. We need another ambulance. He glanced toward the rear compartment. For him, for the secure transport. We can't leave a decedent unattended in a disabled unit. Can you call? No radio. Cell's not connecting. My county radio works. He keyed his shoulder microphone and spoke to his dispatcher. His signal broke up, but a voice eventually answered. He explained the situation twice, slowly. While he talked, Mara climbed into the patient compartment. I followed. The body remained exactly as we had secured it, centered on the stretcher with 3 straps across the sheet. The black property bag sat on the bench beneath a webbed restraint. Mara checked the compartment lights, oxygen system, and rear door locks. Auxiliary power is still running, she said. For now. How long? Depends what failed. The ceiling lights gave a faint, rhythmic pulse, dimming and recovering every few seconds. I noticed it too. Battery isolator. Could be. Could the rear power cut out completely? Yes. The ambulance box was insulated, but not designed to remain warm indefinitely without engine heat. Outside temperature hovered in the high 30s. Graham did not need warmth, but the electronic locks, interior lights, and powered stretcher system all depended on the auxiliary circuit. More importantly, the compartment refrigeration unit installed for body transports had not activated. Its control panel showed a blank screen. Mara pressed the power button. Nothing. When did that stop? She asked. I didn't see it come on at the house. You checked. I checked the indicator. Was it green? I thought it was. You thought. The word landed harder than she intended. I heard it in the pause afterward. Mara looked away first. A body that had been dead for hours would not become a medical emergency because refrigeration failed for another 30 minutes. but chain of custody procedures existed for a reason. Temperature, condition, lividity, any later autopsy findings, everything could be questioned if we could not document how long the system had been down. I opened the side cabinet and pulled out the paper run sheet. Write down engine failure at 2:01. Refrigeration panel blank on inspection at 2:03. You write it. I'm checking the truck. Danny. What? We don't know when it went blank. Then document when we found it blank. She took the clipboard. That was when the rear doors unlocked. The sound was unmistakable. A heavy mechanical clunk, followed by the short electronic chirp that normally happened when someone pressed the exterior release. Mara and I both turned. The door stayed closed. Keller was still near the cab, his voice faint through the wall as he spoke on the radio. I walked to the rear and pushed down on the latch. Locked. You heard that? Mara asked. Yes. Power fluctuation? Probably. She gave me a look that said probably was not documentation. I checked the compartment panel. A small amber light beside the lock switch flickered. I pressed it once. The light went solid, then dark. Electrical, I said. Still means the doors might release. We'll secure them manually. Medic 14 carried 2 orange ratchet straps for equipment failures. I threaded one through the interior door handles and cinched it until the metal complained. Mara added a second strap lower down. Outside, Keller knocked on the side door. County is sending a municipal medic unit, he said when I opened it. 20 minutes, maybe more. Wreck on Frankstown has everything tied up. We can't sit here 20 minutes, Mara said. Keller raised his eyebrows. Why not? The refrigeration system is offline. We don't know how long auxiliary power will last. He's dead, Keller said, gently rather than cruelly. That's not the only issue, I said. If the locks fail, we can't secure the vehicle. If power drops, we lose interior lighting and the powered loading system. We can move him manually. He weighs 200 pounds. Then we use 4 people. Mara checked her phone again. Still 1 bar, no service. Keller continued. My dispatcher reached the funeral home by landline. They're sending a removal van to meet us. How long? I asked. 10 minutes. That was better. It should have been better. Who did they speak to? Mara asked. Someone named Owen. I had heard the name before, though not at Ralston and Pike. It took me a moment to place it. The destination note attached to our call had been entered by an employee identifier. OWENH Owen Hart appeared less than a minute later on Keller's radio. His voice was thin through the rain and static, but close enough to understand. Unit with Mr. Vale needs to remain closed. Do not transfer roadside. Keller frowned and keyed the mic. Identify yourself. Owen Hart, funeral director, Ralston and Pike. Owen Hart was 41, male, and one of the overnight directors at the funeral home. We knew his age later from licensing records. At that moment, he was only a controlled voice carried through a sheriff's radio, speaking too quickly for someone who handled death professionally. Keller said, "Our ambulance is disabled. Your removal van is responding. Negative. Keep the decedent inside the original unit." Why? A pause. Family request. Mara stepped closer to Keller's radio. Which family? Another pause. Mr. Vale's arrangements are sensitive. That isn't an answer, she said. Keller raised one hand, asking her to let him handle it. Mr. Hart, Does your facility have lawful custody authorization from the coroner? Yes. Then send your van and paperwork. We are sending personnel, but do not open the ambulance. The transmission ended. Rain hissed against the pavement. Keller looked at me. Friendly guy. Dispatch to verify the van, I said. They already did. Funeral home confirmed it. Confirmed what? That they own a van, or that the person coming is employed there. He studied me for a second. You think someone is trying to steal a corpse? No, I think we have a phone that doesn't belong to the dead man, a funeral home calling it, and now a funeral director telling us not to open the doors. Mara said, and a disabled ambulance straight after we left the house. I looked at her. She looked back. That was the first time either of us suggested the mechanical failure might not be random. Keller's expression changed, not alarm exactly, but the more focused look of a man deciding what he would have to justify in writing. I'll have dispatch send another deputy, he said. How long? Closest one is covering Oakmont. That's not close. No, inside the cab, the hazard lights stopped flashing. We all heard the relay cease. I climbed in and checked the panel. The dashboard was dead. No clock, no warning lights. The auxiliary hum from the rear compartment faded a few seconds later. Then the interior lights went out. For perhaps half a second, the ambulance became completely black. Mara switched on her flashlight. Its beam landed on the sheet covering Graham's face. Elise screamed outside, not because of the darkness. She was standing beside Keller's cruiser, pointing down the road. A white van had turned onto Halton Road without headlights. It rolled toward us slowly, almost invisible except when Keller's emergency lights washed across its hood. No funeral home logo. No front license plate that I could see. The windshield reflected blue, then red, then blue again. Keller moved into the road and raised his flashlight. The van stopped 40 yards away. Its headlights came on. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then the driver lowered the window. We're from Ralston and Pike, a man called. Keller kept one hand near his holster. Kill the engine and show me your hands. The driver obeyed. A second man sat in the passenger seat. Both wore dark suits. Neither wore coats despite the rain. Keller approached from the driver's side, flashlight angled toward the dashboard. Mara and I stayed at the ambulance. Elise remained behind the cruiser door. Why no headlights? Keller asked. Electrical issue, the driver said. Mara gave me a quick look. The man handed Keller a wallet-sized identification card. Keller studied it, then asked both men to step out. The driver was broad and middle-aged. The passenger was younger, thin, with wet hair combed straight back. They identified themselves as Samuel Pike and Adrian Holt. Where S. Owen Hart? Keller asked. At the funeral home, Pike said. He specifically ordered us not to transfer the body. Pike's face tightened. He shouldn't have said that over an open channel. Why shouldn't he? Because the family asked for privacy. Which family? Pike looked toward Elise. She stepped from behind the cruiser door. I'm his family. Pike stared at her for a beat too long. Then he said, You're not listed. Elise walked closer. I'm his sister. We were told no relatives were attending. Attending what? Pike did not answer. The younger man, Adrian, moved toward the rear of the ambulance. Mara stepped into his path. You need to stay where the deputy can see you. We have to inspect the transfer area. No, we can't take legal custody if the seals are compromised. The seals aren't compromised. How do you know? Because I applied them. His gaze dropped to her uniform name strip, then to the dark interior behind her. Ms. Velez, this needs to happen quickly. Mara's shoulders shifted. He knew her name. That was explainable. Her uniform said VLEZ in reflective thread. Still, his voice carried the same rehearsed familiarity as the caller who had asked whether I was driving. Keller ordered Adrian back toward the van. Pike began speaking quietly with him, too quietly to hear. I climbed into the cab and opened the glove compartment where the maintenance packet was kept. The auxiliary fault sheet had been clipped to the front when I started the shift. It was gone. I searched beneath the registration, insurance card, road flares, and a crushed box of disposable masks. Nothing. Danny, Mara called. I checked the driver's door pocket. No work order. That sheet contained my signature. It also contained the technician's note, fault not reproduced. Check auxiliary isolator if condition returns. I stepped down from the cab. The maintenance record is missing. Mara stared at me. Missing from where? Glove box. You saw it tonight. Yes. And signed it. Yes. Her expression changed. Not accusation. Something worse, recognition. You never told me there was an unresolved electrical fault. It was cleared for service. You knew this could happen. I knew there had been a fault involving the auxiliary system. Yes, she walked 2 paces away, then back. We could have refused the truck. The supervisor said it passed. You could have told me. I should have. That answer took some of the air out of her anger, but not enough. Pike called from beside the van. We need to leave now. The chapel closes at 3. Elise said, What chapel? No answer. Keller moved between the men and the ambulance. Nothing moves until another deputy arrives, and I verify your identities. Pike checked his watch. Officer, the decedent has a scheduled service. His sister says he doesn't. She isn't the arranging party. Elise's face pinched inward. Who is? Pike looked toward Adrian. Adrian looked toward the ambulance. Then the black phone began ringing inside the property bag. The sound was much louder without the engine or heater running. 3 bright notes. Pause. 3 more. Mara shone her flashlight through the rear window. The bag lay strapped to the bench where we had left it. Pike heard the ringtone. His composure broke, only slightly, a twitch of his jaw, a step toward the doors before he caught himself. Keller noticed. So you recognize that phone, he said. Pike said nothing. Who does it belong to? The ringtone continued. Adrian moved first. He spun toward the white van and yanked open the passenger door. Keller shouted for him to stop. Adrian reached inside. I could not see his hands. Keller drew his pistol. Hands, show me your hands. Everything became clipped after that. Mara grabbed Elise and pulled her behind the ambulance. Pike raised both arms. Adrian froze half inside the van. Rain hit the metal roof hard enough to sound like thrown gravel. Back away, Keller shouted. Adrian did, slowly. His right hand held a small black device with an antenna. Not a gun. A signal jammer. Even I recognized it from the shape, though I had never seen one outside training bulletins and online articles. Keller ordered him to drop it. The device hit the wet road and broke into two pieces. At once, Mara's phone began vibrating. Keller's radio erupted with overlapping voices. The mobile terminal inside the cab rebooted, and somewhere beneath the ambulance, the starter engaged by itself. The engine cranked once, twice, then caught. Every exterior light came on at the same time. Headlights, scene lights, rear floodlamps. The powered rear door lock released with a heavy clunk. Our orange straps held for 1 second. The upper strap tore free from its anchor. The rear doors opened 6 inches. A hand reached through from inside. Not Graham's. It was bare, dirty at the fingertips, and very much alive. Mara saw it first. "There's someone in the ambulance." The hand withdrew. Something struck the inside of the doors. The lower ratchet strap stretched tight. Once, twice. On the third impact, one of the interior handles snapped. The doors swung wide. A man in gray funeral clothes dropped from beneath the stretcher, hit the road on one shoulder, and scrambled toward the drainage ditch. He had been inside the ambulance since before we left Graham's house, and looped around his wrist, glowing red in Keller's emergency lights, was a thick rubber phone case. Graham's missing phone. The man went over the lip of the drainage ditch badly. His right foot slid on the wet grass, his arms windmilled, and for a moment I thought he would catch himself. Then he disappeared with a sound like somebody dropping a sack of tools into shallow water. Keller ran after him. "Stay with the ambulance," he shouted. I did not. That was the first mistake I made after the doors opened, though by then the night had collected enough mistakes that one more hardly felt distinct. I jumped from the rear step and followed Keller down the embankment. My boots hit mud beneath the grass. My left leg shot forward. I landed on one knee and one hand, hard enough to drive grit through the fabric of my trousers. The ditch was deeper than it looked from the road, perhaps 8 feet from shoulder to bottom. Rainwater moved through it in a brown stream no more than ankle deep, flowing west toward Plum Creek. The hidden man was already upright and running downstream, bent forward with one hand clamped to his injured shoulder. Keller's flashlight jumped across weeds, concrete, and the silver underside of leaves. "Sheriff's office." "Stop." The man did not stop. Behind us, Mara yelled my name. I kept moving. There was a concrete culvert 50 yards ahead where the ditch passed beneath Hulton Road's intersection with a narrow service lane. I knew the area. The culvert opened on the other side near an abandoned rail spur and a line of storage garages. Beyond those garages, the land dropped toward the creek and became a mess of maintenance roads, utility easements, and fenced industrial lots. Once he entered that culvert, he could go 3 directions without crossing a lit road. "Keller, cut right," I shouted. Keller either did not hear me or ignored me. He stayed in the water behind the man. I climbed the side of the ditch, intending to reach the service lane and intercept him at the far opening. The wet ground crumbled beneath my boots. My knee protested every step, a deep pressure under the kneecap. At the top, I found a chain link fence. It ran parallel to the ditch and blocked the direct path to the culvert exit. There was no gate. I grabbed the mesh and shook it as though that might alter the geography. Below, Keller entered the culvert. His flashlight beam became a white circle moving through the tunnel. The hidden man was somewhere ahead of it, splashing through runoff. Then I heard a crack. A gunshot, I thought. I dropped instinctively, shoulder striking the fence post. A second crack came from inside the culvert, followed by Keller swearing. "Keller, I'm fine," the hidden man screamed, not in pain, in fear. The scream shot through the concrete pipe and came out distorted, deeper than a human voice should have sounded. For several seconds, it seemed to surround us, bouncing from the garages and the wet road. Mara called from above the ditch. What happened? A dark shape burst from the culvert's far opening. It moved on 4 legs. Keller came out behind it with his pistol raised, then lowered the weapon when the shape scrambled into the weeds. A deer, young, thin, panicked by 2 men charging through the drainage tunnel. It had struck the corrugated metal lining or kicked loose debris, making the cracks we mistook for gunfire. The deer bounded across the service lane and disappeared behind the garages. The hidden man did not emerge. I climbed over the fence. It was an ugly process involving 1 boot wedged into the mesh and my rain jacket catching on the twisted wire at the top. By the time I dropped on the other side, Keller was kneeling near the culvert opening. Water ran from his trousers. Blood marked one side of his face where something had cut his cheek. "He took a branch," Keller said. "Where?" He pointed toward a split in the drainage channel. 20 yards beyond the culvert, the ditch divided around a concrete support wall. The main channel continued west. A narrower storm pipe, barely 4 feet high, angled south beneath the storage complex. "He crawled in there," Keller said. "You follow him. That pipe narrows. I'm not entering blind." A sensible decision. I hated it immediately. We shone our lights inside. The pipe curved after 30 feet, blocking the view. Water dripped from its ceiling in slow, heavy drops. Scrape marks showed in the green algae along one wall. Something red lay near the entrance. I reached in and pulled it free. Graham's phone case. Only the case. The phone itself was gone. There was something else beneath it, a white plastic hospital wristband, stretched until the fastening holes had torn. Keller held it under his flashlight. Vale, Graham T. The printed date was today's date. July would have faded more slowly into the plastic than paper, but this ink was fresh. No smearing. No dirt ground into the edges. "That from a hospital?" Keller asked. "It's the style hospitals use." "Which one?" The facility code read SVMC. St. Vincent Medical Center was on the other side of Pittsburgh. Mara had called twice while we were in the ditch. I called her back. She answered immediately. "Where are you?" "Past the culvert, by the storage garages." "He went into a storm pipe. Come back. We found a hospital band with Graham's name. Danny, come back now." Her voice had changed. No irritation. No argument. Fear stripped flat. What happened? The body moved. For half a second, the pipe in front of me seemed to narrow. How? I don't know. Is he? He's still dead. Just get back here. Keller and I returned by the service lane, following it east until it climbed to Halton Road. My knee stiffened as we walked. Keller's cut had started bleeding down his jaw, diluted pink by the rain. From the top of the rise, I could map the scene clearly. Medic 14 sat angled on the eastbound shoulder, rear doors open beneath the white blaze of its floodlights. Keller's cruiser was behind it, emergency lights still rotating. The unmarked funeral van remained 40 yards ahead in the opposite lane. Samuel Pike stood with his hands on the roof of the van. Adrian Holt knelt on the pavement with his fingers laced behind his head. Elise had moved into the front passenger seat of the ambulance. Mara stood at the open rear doors, flashlight fixed on the stretcher. A second sheriff's cruiser was approaching from the west. It arrived as we reached the road. Deputy Claire Donnelly was 36, female, and built like a distance runner, with narrow shoulders and a quick, economical way of moving. She stepped out already pulling on rain gloves, took in Keller's bleeding face, the 2 funeral home men, the disabled vehicles, and the open ambulance, then asked the only question that mattered. "Who is armed?" "Me," Keller said. Donnelly pointed at Pike and Adrian. "Them, not located yet." She frisked both men, then handcuffed them separately and placed Adrian in the rear of her cruiser. Pike remained beside the van under Keller's watch. I climbed into the patient compartment. Graham's body had not changed position exactly. The stretcher had. Its backrest had risen about 20 degrees, lifting his shoulders and making the sheet form a seated slope. With the rear lights behind him and his face still covered, the effect was immediate and awful. A dead man, apparently trying to sit up in an ambulance. Mara pointed to the control panel. The powered backrest activated when the electrical system came online. Short circuit, or somebody pressed the remote. The stretcher had a wired control handset clipped near the foot end. It dangled loose against the frame. I picked it up. The button for raising the backrest was stuck beneath the cracked rubber cover. When the truck rebooted, it probably took continuous input. Probably. She lowered the backrest manually. The motor whined. Graham sank flat again. An explainable movement. My heart still took too long to slow down. "You left Elise alone?" I asked. "I had the doors open and could see her." "I told you to stay with the ambulance. You ran into a ditch." "I was helping Keller." "You were following a question." The distinction hurt because it was accurate. I showed her the wristband. She read it twice. "St. Vincent. That's what the code suggests. Graham's sister said he hadn't been hospitalized. We need to confirm the body." Mara's head came up. "We already confirmed identity from the wallet." "We confirmed the wallet. You want to expose him roadside." "I want Elise to identify his face again." She already asked to, and I refused. That was before a living man came out from under his stretcher, wearing Graham's phone case. Mara pressed her lips together. Our second attempt to solve the problem began with the most basic procedure available. Identify the deceased, document the scene, and transfer custody to a verified unit. Donnelly requested a municipal ambulance and a county coroner investigator. She also photographed the jammer, both vans, our damaged doors, and the wristband. Keller contacted his supervisor. Mara called our dispatcher now that service had returned. The dispatcher claimed Medic 14 had shown as moving normally until 2:08. "We were dead on the shoulder by 2:01, I said. The GPS log says otherwise, Mara replied after ending the call. It shows us continuing east for almost 3 miles, to the funeral home. Almost. Then the track snaps back here. The jammer had not merely blocked our signal. Something had fed false location data into the system or caused the terminal to buffer and misreport it. Pike heard us talking. "You need to get that body inside," he said. Keller turned toward him. "You need to stop giving instructions. The service starts at 3. Elise climbed down from the cab. "What service?" Pike looked at her with open exhaustion now. The careful funeral director manner had thinned. "You should not be here." "She's his sister," Donnelly said. "She is not the legal representative." "Who is?" Pike glanced at the black property bag. Mara saw it. "So the answer is in there." Pike said nothing. We decided to open the bag under camera. Mara cut the evidence seal she had initialed. Donnelly recorded the process on her body camera while Keller watched Pike. Inside were Graham's wallet, keys, peppermint gum, folded reading glasses, the black cased phone, and a small brass key none of us remembered cataloging at the house. The phone had no passcode. That was new. Mara woke the screen and opened the recent calls. Every incoming call labeled Graham Vale came from the funeral home's main number. The outgoing history showed one call at 11:31 p.m. to Elise. The phone had been used to call her. Donnelly asked, "Can you identify whose device this is?" Elise looked at the lock screen photograph. It showed Graham and another man standing beside a fishing boat. The other man was the same person whose body lay on our stretcher. Elise put one hand against the doorframe. "That's Dennis," she said. "Your cousin who died last week?" Mara asked. "Yes." "Then whose body is this?" Elise looked toward the covered stretcher. "I thought it was Graham." Her voice became smaller. "I saw his clothes, his chair. His face was swollen on one side. I thought it was Graham." Mara exchanged a look with me. We pulled back the sheet only far enough for Elise to view the face. She approached with Donnelly supporting one elbow. The dead man had Graham's gray hair, Graham's heavy eyebrows, and a similar nose. In the dim living room, after death had changed the coloring and softened the mouth, the mistake was understandable. Elise looked for less than 3 seconds. "That's Dennis." Nobody spoke. Graham's wallet had been planted on Dennis's body. Graham had called Elise from Dennis's phone, and somewhere between the house and the ditch, a living man carrying Graham's actual phone had hidden beneath the stretcher. We had not transported Graham Vale. Not yet. The municipal ambulance arrived from the west just before 2:30. Its crew parked nose to nose with us because the road was too narrow to turn around safely. The lead paramedic, Thomas Reed, 45, male, stepped down wearing a reflective jacket, and an expression that suggested dispatch had told him only a quarter of the story. His partner began preparing their manual stretcher while Donnelly explained the custody problem. Our plan was simple. Transfer Dennis's body to the municipal unit. Seal both phones and the wristband as evidence. Detain Pike and Adrian until detectives arrived. Search the storm drainage system at daylight with additional officers. It was the safest plan we had made all night. It failed before we moved the stretcher 6 feet. Thomas inspected our rear loading system and crouched beside the bumper. "Your brake line's leaking," he said. I joined him. A dark thread of fluid ran down the inside of the left rear tire. Not rainwater, oily. Amber beneath the flashlight. "Ruptured?" I asked. "Looks cut." The line had been sliced cleanly near the frame, in a place difficult to reach without crawling beneath the ambulance. The hidden man had been under the stretcher. He could not have cut a brake line from inside. Someone else had tampered with the truck before we left the house. A horn sounded from the west. One long blast. Then headlights rounded the curve at speed. A box truck came toward us in the eastbound lane, too fast for the wet road and the cluster of emergency vehicles ahead. Donnelly ran into the roadway, waving her flashlight. The truck braked. Its rear began to swing. "Move," Keller shouted. The box truck jackknifed across both lanes. Its cargo body struck the front corner of the municipal ambulance with a crushing metallic roar. Glass burst across the road. The impact pushed the ambulance sideways into Donnelly's cruiser. Thomas was knocked from his feet. Mara pulled me backward by my jacket as the vehicles folded together 10 yards from us. The truck stopped diagonally across Hulton Road. The road west was sealed. To the east, the white funeral van accelerated. Pike was still handcuffed beside Keller. Adrian was inside Donnelly's cruiser. Nobody we had detained was driving it. The van's headlights vanished around the bend toward Ralston and Pike. Donnelly ran to the box truck's cab. The driver was conscious, but bleeding from the forehead, dazed and repeating that his brakes had locked. Thomas's partner screamed from inside the damaged municipal ambulance. The passenger door had collapsed inward against her leg. Mara went to help. Keller called for fire rescue. I stood beside Medic 14, breathing through the diesel exhaust and the hot chemical smell of deployed airbags. Westbound escape was impossible. Our replacement ambulance was wrecked. The county units were now responding to a traffic collision with entrapment. Then the rain intensified. Water began rising through the drainage ditch, carrying branches and plastic bottles toward the culvert where the hidden man had disappeared. Keller's dispatcher issued a flash flood warning for Plum Creek. If Graham, or whoever the hidden man was, remained in that storm system, the pipe could fill. "We have to go after him," Elise said. "No," Keller replied. "You have to stay here." He called me from Dennis's phone. He wanted me to think Dennis was him, which means he may be dangerous, or he's in danger. Mara returned with blood on one sleeve that was not hers. Fire crew is 8 minutes out. Thomas's partner has a trapped ankle but good circulation. She looked toward the drainage ditch. The water had risen above the hidden man's footprints. I looked east. Ralston and Pike funeral services stood less than 3 miles away, at the far end of Hulton Road, beside the old Catholic cemetery. The storm pipe angled in that direction before joining Plum Creek. The funeral home van had gone there. So had the false GPS track from our ambulance. Our engine was running again, but the brake line was cut. We could not drive safely on the road. There was another route. A maintenance access track ran from the storage garages along the abandoned rail spur. It crossed behind the cemetery and ended at the funeral home's rear service entrance. It was gravel, steep in places, and already taking water, but it avoided the blocked highway. "We can't take Medic 14, Mara said when I explained it. "No brakes. And we can't leave Dennis's body here with 2 suspects, an injured truck driver and an open ambulance." Donnelly looked at Keller. Keller looked at the rising ditch. Then Thomas shouted from the wrecked unit. Smoke was pushing from beneath its hood. The damaged municipal ambulance carried 2 oxygen cylinders. "Everyone back," Mara yelled. We had seconds, not minutes. Keller dragged Pike toward his cruiser. Donnelly pulled Adrian from the back seat. Elise climbed into Medic 14 without being told. I released the parking brake. The ambulance began rolling downhill. Mara stared at me through the open driver's door. "What are you doing?" "Getting it away from the oxygen." "With no brakes." The access road climbs before it descends. That is not a plan. The municipal ambulance's engine compartment flashed orange. Heat touched the side of my face from 20 yards away. Mara climbed into the passenger seat and slammed the door. Keller shouted something I could not hear. I steered Medic 14 off Hulton Road, down the service lane, and through the open gate beside the storage garages. The gravel track narrowed between the abandoned railway embankment and the flood-swollen drainage channel. Behind us, the damaged ambulance caught fire. Ahead, the funeral home's rear chapel lights glowed through the trees. There was no room to turn around. And because our brake fluid was already draining onto the gravel, there would be no reliable way to stop once the track began descending toward it. The maintenance track climbed for the first 100 yards. That saved us. Medic 14 rolled slowly between the abandoned rail bed on our left and the drainage channel on our right, its engine running, but the brake pedal sinking nearly to the floor. Gravel snapped beneath the tires. Branches dragged along the passenger side with a fingernail scrape. I kept the transmission in low gear. "Speed?" Mara asked. 8. "Can you stop?" "No." Elise sat on the bench behind us beside Dennis's covered body, one hand wrapped around a ceiling rail. She had stopped asking whether we were doing the right thing. None of us believed we were. The track crested behind the cemetery. Beyond it, the ground dropped sharply toward Ralston and Pike. I could see the funeral home through the bare trees, a long brick building with a pitched slate roof, 2 white columns at the front, and a newer concrete service wing behind it. The rear loading bay stood open beneath a yellow security light. The white van was parked inside. A man waited beside it. Owen Hart. I knew it from the way Pike had looked when the name came over Keller's radio, not respect, exactly. Fear arranged to resemble obedience. Mara leaned forward. "There's a gate." A chain-link vehicle gate crossed the maintenance track halfway down the slope. It was shut. I pumped the brake pedal. "Nothing. Seat belts," I said. Elise grabbed the lap belt beside the bench. Mara braced one hand against the dashboard. "What are you going to do?" "Hit it near the latch." "That's your plan." "It's a gate." "Deal." So is the bumper. The ambulance gathered speed, 10 miles per hour, 12. The engine held us back, but not enough. I aimed for the right side, where the chain wrapped around a rusted post. At 20 yards, I saw that the chain was secured with a brass padlock. Elise shouted from the rear. The key. Mara twisted around. What? The brass key in Dennis's bag. There was no time to stop and use it. But the key explained the gate. Someone expected Dennis's belongings to pass through here. Someone expected us. Medic 14 hit the chain. The gate bowed inward. The right post tore free from softened ground and slammed across the hood. Glass cracked at the lower edge of the windshield. The ambulance lurched left, tires skidding over wet gravel. I fought the wheel. The drainage channel appeared beside my door, black water moving fast below us. Then the tires caught. We stayed upright. The broken gate dragged beneath the chassis, screaming metal against metal. "Everybody okay?" Mara asked. He's answered with a breathless noise. My shoulder had struck the door. Pain spread down my arm, hot and immediate. The funeral home rushed toward us. "Daniel," Mara said, "I saw it. The loading bay. Concrete walls on both sides. Slight uphill ramp, enough room to funnel the truck." I steered straight for it. Owen Hart stepped into the bay and waved both arms, not warning us away, guiding us in. "Don't trust him," Mara said. "I'm not." The front wheels hit the loading ramp. Speed dropped. 9, 6, 3. The bumper struck a rubber loading stop. My chest hit the seat belt. The engine stalled. Medic 14 stopped halfway inside the bay. For several seconds, all I could hear was rain dripping from the undercarriage and my own breath moving too fast through my nose. We had arrived. We had no way back. Owen approached my window. He wore shirt sleeves beneath a black vest, no jacket. His hair was damp and flattened on one side. There was a bruise along his jaw. "Open the rear doors," he said. Mara climbed out with the black phone in one hand and the brass key in the other. "Where S. Graham?" Owen looked at the phone. "He's alive." Elise stepped down from the rear. "Where is my brother?" Owen's eyes shifted toward her. For the first time, his confidence slipped. "You weren't supposed to come." She slapped him hard. The sound cracked through the loading bay. Owen touched his cheek, but did not retaliate. Mara said, "Start talking." A door opened inside the funeral home. Samuel Pike entered the bay. Would have been handcuffed beside Keller on Halton Road. Instead, one cuff hung open from his left wrist. Blood streaked his palm. He held Keller's pistol in his right hand. Mara froze. I stepped out of the cab slowly. Pike pointed the weapon at us. Phones down. Mara placed Dennis's phone on the concrete. I raised my hands. Elise did neither. "Where's Ray?" she asked. Pike looked exhausted. "Alive when I left," meaning on the ground. Owen stared at the gun. "You said nobody would get hurt." "That was before you called the ambulance yourself. You disabled their radio to delay them. You cut the brakes." Pike's eyes hardened. "Adrian did that." The pieces came together in ugly, ordinary increments. Adrian and the hidden man had been at Graham's house before we arrived. One hid in the ambulance during the body loading. Adrian cut the brake line and planted the jammer in the van. Owen used Dennis's phone to create a false record, while Graham's identification was placed on the body. A controlled misidentification, a delayed transport, a dead cousin substituted for a living man. "What were you trying to do?" Mara asked. Pike motioned with the pistol toward the interior door. "Bring Dennis inside." "No," I said. The gun shifted toward me. "You don't get a vote." Owen said, "Samuel, it's over." "It is not over until the register is signed." Elise looked at him. What register? Nobody answered. Then something struck the inside of the white van. Once, a dull thump. Pike flinched. Another thump. Elise moved toward it. Pike swung the pistol toward her. Stop. The van doors rattled. A man's voice called from inside. Elise, her face changed. Graham, Pike fired. The shot hit the ceiling above her, blasting dust and insulation from the concrete seam. The report inside the bay punched through my ears and left a high electrical ringing. Everybody moved at once. Mara dragged Elise behind Medic 14. Owen grabbed Pike's gun arm. I went for the van. Pike struck Owen across the face with the pistol. Owen fell against the loading platform. The gun fired again. The bullet hit the ambulance's rear quarter panel. I reached the van doors and yanked the handle. Locked. The brass key. Mara had dropped it near Dennis's phone. Pike kicked Owen in the ribs and turned toward me. I dove behind the van as a third shot broke the rear window. Glass sprayed across my neck. Something cut deeply below my right ear. Warm blood ran inside my collar. Danny, Mara shouted. I'm okay. I was not sure. I crawled beneath the edge of the loading platform, found the brass key on the floor, and slid it toward Mara. It stopped halfway between us. Exposed concrete. Pike saw it. He stepped toward the key. Owen caught his ankle from the floor. Pike fell on one knee. Mara ran 3 steps. She scooped up the key and reached the van. Pike fired again. Mara spun and hit the side of Medic 14. For one blank second, I thought the bullet had gone through her. Then she shouted, "Open it." Blood darkened her left sleeve. She could still move the arm. I took the key. It fit the padlock on the van's rear latch. Inside, Graham Vale lay on the floor with his wrists bound in front of him and duct tape around his ankles. His face was bruised. His hospital gown was visible beneath a funeral suit jacket that did not fit him. The hidden man from the ambulance crouched beside him. He raised both hands. "Don't shoot. I don't have a gun." Good. He was younger than Graham, perhaps 50, gray at the temples, with algae streaked down one side of his funeral trousers. His right shoulder hung low from the fall into the ditch. He held Graham's red-cased phone. "Elise," Graham said. His voice was weak but steady. She tried to reach him. Mara held her back. Pike was upright again. Owen lay curled near the wall. The pistol pointed toward the open van. "Close it," Pike said. The younger man stepped between Graham and the doors. "My name is Leonard Shaw," he said. "I work at St. Vincent." Pike aimed at him. Leonard continued anyway. "He's going to kill us." Pike fired. Leonard jerked backward and collapsed inside the van. Elise screamed. The bullet had entered high in his abdomen. He pressed both hands against the wound, shock already flattening his expression. Mara moved toward him. Pike pointed the gun at her. "Stay." She stopped. The trap had tightened completely. A wounded man in the van. Graham restrained. Owen down. Dennis's body in our ambulance. No police, no working brakes. Pike with Keller's pistol and enough desperation to use it. He ordered me to unload Dennis. "Why?" I asked. "Because he has to be in the chapel. He's already dead. That's the point." Owen laughed once from the floor. It sounded painful. Pike looked at him. Owen said, "Tell them." Pike kicked him again. This time Owen did not curl. He grabbed Pike's leg and held on. The gun fired downward. Owen stopped moving. Pike stared at what he had done. That hesitation saved us. Mara rushed him from the side. She struck his forearm with the heavy metal bracket from the broken ratchet strap. The pistol dropped. I kicked it beneath the ambulance. Pike hit Mara across the face and drove her into the rear bumper. I grabbed him. He was stronger than he looked. We slammed into the loading platform. My injured shoulder folded. Pain exploded behind my eyes. Pike drove his thumb into the cut on my neck. I let go. He went for the pistol. Elise reached it first. She crawled beneath the ambulance, seized it, and backed away on both knees. Her hands shook so badly the muzzle moved in circles. "Don't," Pike said, not a command now. A plea. Elise pointed the pistol at his chest. "Untie my brother." Pike raised his hands. Behind him, Owen made a wet, choking sound. Mara stood with one hand against her bleeding arm. "Put the gun down, Elise. He killed that man. Owen is still alive." Pike took one step toward Elise. She fired. The bullet struck the concrete beside his foot. Fragments cut his trouser leg. He stopped. Mara said her name again, lower this time. Elise kept the gun raised. I crawled to Owen. The bullet had entered low in his abdomen. Blood soaked his vest and pooled beneath his back. He was conscious but fading. "What register?" I asked. His lips moved. I leaned closer. "Cremation authorization," he whispered. Pike shut his eyes. Owen told us in pieces. Ralston and Pike had been falsifying unattended cremations for years. Mostly homeless decedents, people without close family, bodies transferred under county contracts. Graham had found irregularities while arranging Dennis's funeral, wrong identification numbers, duplicate authorization pages, signatures belonging to people already dead. He had gone to St. Vincent after Pike's men assaulted him in the funeral home parking lot. Leonard, a hospital transport orderly, helped him leave before men using false family credentials could remove him. Their plan had been to reach police. Pike's plan had been simpler. Make Dennis become Graham on paper. Make Graham disappear as Dennis during a private cremation. Two men, similar age and build, both recently connected to the same funeral home. One family confused by grief. One overnight ambulance crew following paperwork. Leonard had hidden beneath the stretcher to prevent Pike's men from taking Dennis's body directly and to carry Graham's phone as proof. But when he realized Adrian was following, he stayed hidden too long. The unanswered calls were Owen, trying to locate Dennis's phone and determine which ambulance had the body. The voice asking whether I was driving had been Graham, forced to speak while Pike listened, because my name appeared on the dispatch transfer record. None of it was supernatural. That made it worse. Pike backed toward the interior door. Elise still had the gun. Mara moved between them despite the blood running to her fingertips. "Don't make her shoot you," Mara said. Pike looked at the open van, at Leonard bleeding inside, at Owen dying on the floor, at Dennis's body. Then he ran, not into the funeral home, toward Medic 14. He climbed into the cab and started the engine. I understood before anyone else did. The ambulance had no brakes. The loading bay ramp opened onto the cemetery road, which descended toward Plum Creek. Dennis was still inside. Pike shifted into reverse. Elise down, the ambulance lurched backward. Mara dragged Elise aside. I jumped onto the driver's step and reached through the open window. Pike punched me once in the throat, then again in the temple. My grip slipped. The ambulance rolled out of the bay. Faster. I caught the steering wheel with both hands and let my feet drag against the concrete. Pike tried to turn toward the cemetery gate. If he reached the slope, he could abandon the truck, let it crash, and destroy the body, the phones, and whatever else remained inside. I reached for the gear selector. He bit my hand, actually bit it. I shoved my thumb into his eye. He screamed and let go. I pulled the selector into park. The transmission hammered. The ambulance continued rolling. 10 feet from the cemetery road. 5. Mara appeared at the passenger door and climbed halfway inside. Her injured arm failed when she tried to pull herself higher. Pike kicked at her. I grabbed the parking brake release and yanked it repeatedly. Nothing. Then I saw the gate post we had torn loose. It was still wedged beneath the chassis, one end dragging. "Turn left," Mara shouted. I wrenched the wheel. Medic 14's rear wheels climbed the curb beside the loading bay. The gate post caught against a concrete drainage bollard. The ambulance stopped so violently that Pike's forehead struck the windshield. He sagged against the steering wheel. I fell onto the pavement. My left knee hit first. Something tore inside it. I did not stand again that night. Mara reached through the passenger window and turned off the engine. For a while, nobody moved. Then, sirens became audible beyond the cemetery. Not sudden saviors. Keller had been calling them before we left. The blocked road had delayed them. The gunshots had finally directed them to the rear entrance. Deputies entered through the cemetery on foot. They found Pike unconscious in the cab. Owen alive, but critically wounded. Leonard bleeding heavily inside the van. Graham bound, hypothermic, and dehydrated. Elise sitting on the concrete with Keller's pistol several feet away, and her hands pressed flat against the ground. Mara had a gunshot graze along her upper arm and a fractured cheekbone. I had a deep neck laceration, a dislocated shoulder, and torn ligaments in my knee. Dennis remained strapped to our stretcher, still misidentified on half the paperwork, still waiting for his own funeral to end. Samuel Pike survived. So did Graham. Owen died before reaching surgery. Leonard made it to the hospital with no pulse twice and came back both times. The one bullet fragment remained near his spine. By dawn, the floodwater had risen over the lower cemetery road. Medic 14 stood crooked against the bollard, rear doors open, rainwater collecting around the wheels. The last thing I saw before the deputies put me into another ambulance was the chapel through the service corridor. Rows of empty chairs, a closed casket at the front, and on an easel beside it, beneath a soft yellow spotlight, a framed photograph of Graham Vale. The service had been prepared in advance. They had only been waiting for his body. The first person who asked me what happened was a trauma nurse cutting off my uniform. I remember that because she did not look at my face when she asked. She was focused on the blood drying inside my collar, and the swelling around my left knee. Working trauma shears through the thick navy fabric in short, efficient bites. What happened tonight? Ambulance lost its brakes. That explained the bite mark. I looked at my right hand. Samuel Pike's teeth had left a purple half circle below my thumb. No, gunshot. Not mine. She nodded, as though those answers belonged together. The emergency department at UPMC East was bright enough to erase time. No windows in the trauma bay, no darkness, no rain, only white ceiling panels and the steady electronic chirp of monitors separated by curtains. Someone had wrapped a towel around my neck at the funeral home. By the time they removed it, the fabric had become stiff and brown at the edges. Mara was in the next bay. I could hear her arguing with a resident. It's a graze. It may have fractured the humerus. I can move my fingers. That isn't how bones work. Her voice sounded thick because of the swelling in her cheek. Hearing her complain helped. It meant she was conscious, oriented, and still herself enough to be difficult. They reduced my shoulder under sedation and placed 14 stitches along the cut beneath my ear. An MRI later confirmed a torn anterior cruciate ligament and damage to the medial meniscus. The doctor explained it using a model knee while I watched rain move in crooked lines down the treatment room window. "Can you drive with your right leg?" I asked. He stopped turning the plastic joint. "Eventually." "How eventually? You won't be working an ambulance for a while." He said it gently. That made it worse. Driving had become the one part of my life I did not question. Routes made sense. Intersections had rules. Problems came with coordinates. And even when the destination was bad, you could point the vehicle toward it and measure progress by distance. A damaged knee was manageable. The idea of sitting still was not. A sheriff's detective interviewed me at 7:40 that morning. Detective Nina Caldwell was 43, female, and had the calm, dry expression of someone who had listened to people improve their own stories for a living. She placed a recorder on the table beside my untouched breakfast and asked me to begin at Graham's house. I gave her times. 1:47, first ringing phone. 1:51, dispatch note. 2:01, engine failure. 2:14, Leonard Shaw exited the ambulance. 2:30, body confirmed as Dennis. She let me speak without interruption until I reached the maintenance packet. Then she stopped me. "You saw a written warning regarding the auxiliary system, a resolved work order. What did the work order say? Fault not reproduced. Check auxiliary isolator if condition returns. And you signed the vehicle acceptance." "Yes." "Did you perform the required inspection?" I looked at the condensation on the water cup. "Not completely." "What did you skip?" "Engine compartment. Brake fluid reservoir, rear electrical panel." She wrote that down. The pen made a soft, scratching sound. I had spent years documenting other people's mistakes because I believed precision protected you. It did, sometimes. It also preserved the shape of your own failures once somebody knew where to look. "Did the electrical fault cause the loss of brakes?" Caldwell asked. "No, the line was cut." "Then, why does the skipped inspection matter?" "Because I might have seen it. You believe the brake line was cut before you left Graham's residence?" "Yes. Your supervisor believes it happened later." "My supervisor wasn't there." Caldwell watched me for a moment. "No," she said. He was. Allegheny Valley EMS placed me and Mara on administrative leave before noon. The wording in the email was careful. Standard procedure following a critical incident. No determination of fault. Cooperation expected. My supervisor, Glenn Barlow, called twice. I did not answer. Mara did. She came into my room after X-rays confirmed the bullet had only grazed the outside of her upper arm. Her cheekbone was fractured, but stable. One eye had swollen almost closed. She carried her hospital belongings in a clear plastic bag and held her phone away from her face as though it smelled bad. Glenn says he needs our preliminary incident statements before end of day. Tell him to ask the detective. I told him to go perform a complete vehicle inspection on himself. Anatomically difficult. I was more specific. She sat in the chair beside the bed and immediately winced, not from the arm, from the weight of sitting down after staying upright too long. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. A floor buffer hummed in the corridor. Somewhere nearby, an ice machine dumped a load with a sudden mechanical crash. Mara flinched. So did I. She stared at the doorway. Machine, I said. I know. The ordinary explanation did not make our bodies believe it any faster. How S. Leonard? I asked. Surgery. They removed part of his small intestine. Bullet damaged a vessel near the spine, but not the spinal cord. Graham admitted rhabdomyolysis, dehydration, mild hypothermia, 2 cracked ribs. They think Pike's people kept him sedated between moves. Elise, with him. Owen, she looked down at the clear bag in her lap. You know, I did. Still, I had expected the hospital to alter the answer. Hospitals did that in stories. People arrived without pulses and left weeks later leaning on canes, grateful and transformed. Owen had bled too long on the funeral home floor. There was no version of the morning where everyone survived. Mara rubbed the edge of the bag between her fingers. You should have told me about the truck. I know. You should have refused it. I know. I also should have stopped you from taking the service track. You tried, not hard enough. You were in the passenger seat. I could have pulled the key. With no brakes on a slope, she looked at me. Fine, she said. That part might have been worse. It was not forgiveness. It was the beginning of something less clean and probably more useful. Detectives searched Ralston and Pike for 4 days. The first reports described record irregularities. The later warrants used different language. Identity substitution, unlawful disposition of human remains, insurance fraud, forgery, obstruction, kidnapping, attempted murder. The cremation retort had been shut down before dawn. Inside a locked records room beneath the preparation area, investigators found 2 sets of ledgers. The official set matched county filings. The second used initials, transfer numbers, weights, and payment amounts. 47 entries were flagged for review. 21 involved bodies with no known next of kin. 9 involved families who had requested cremation and received ashes. 3 families were later told their relatives. Ashes had been scattered due to administrative misunderstandings. The rest were more difficult. Some records corresponded to people whose identities had never been firmly established. Graham had noticed duplicate identification numbers because Dennis's paperwork carried the same internal code as a man cremated 6 months earlier. When he questioned Owen tried to dismiss it as clerical error. Graham kept asking. That was Graham's flaw, Elise told reporters later. He could not let a crooked number remain crooked. I understood that. Owen Hart had helped Pike falsify records for nearly 7 years. That fact arrived in the newspapers before the detail that Owen had contacted a state investigator 3 weeks before Graham's abduction. He had apparently tried to negotiate immunity, then lost nerve when Pike discovered the contact. He was neither innocent nor simple. At the funeral home, he had tried to prevent Pike from killing Graham. Years earlier, he had helped make other people disappear on paper. Both things remained true. Samuel Pike was charged with murder for Owen's death, attempted murder, kidnapping, aggravated assault, evidence tampering, abuse of a corpse, and enough financial crimes to fill a second page. Adrian Holt was arrested before sunrise after being treated for a wrist injury. He claimed he had only cut the brake line to delay us and never intended for anyone to drive the ambulance. The box truck collision was ruled accidental. Its driver had approached too quickly, saw Donnelly in the road, and overcorrected on wet pavement. The brake lock sensation came from the trailer shifting during the skid, not sabotage. That answer almost felt disappointing. By then, every coincidence seemed guilty until proven otherwise. Keller had suffered a concussion and a fractured wrist when Pike attacked him during the confusion after the crash. Pike obtained the pistol when Keller fell against the cruiser. Donnelly's body camera captured only part of it: rain, shouting, Pike dropping out of frame, then Keller striking the pavement. Keller visited me 2 weeks later. I was home by then, wearing a hinged knee brace and sleeping in 30-minute pieces on the couch. He brought a paper bag containing coffee and 2 glazed donuts. "You look terrible," he said. "You have a cast. Mine is distinguished." He sat in the armchair and examined my apartment without appearing to. The folded blankets, the walker, the unopened mail arranged in a straight pile on the table. "They clear you yet?" he asked. "No, going to. Internal review is pending." He nodded as though he had expected that phrase. "What about you? Desk duty?" "You hate desk duty." "I hate concussions more." We drank coffee. Outside, a garbage truck compressed a load with a deep hydraulic groan. My shoulders tightened before I recognized it. Keller noticed. He looked toward the window, but did not comment. After a while, he said, "Elise asked about you." "How S. Graham? Mean. That sounds promising." Apparently, he threw a cup at a physical therapist. "Very promising." Keller took a bite of donut and chewed slowly. "They confirmed Leonard's story," he said. "Hospital cameras show Graham admitted under his real name at 9:18 p.m. Leonard moved him to a staff room after 2 men presented forged power of attorney paperwork. Why didn't Leonard call police? He did. I looked at him. The call was transferred twice. While he waited, one of Pike's people entered the ward. Leonard panicked, moved Graham himself. He should have waited. Yes, he should have followed procedure. Yes, he saved Graham. Yes, we sat with that. Procedure had failed Leonard, so he broke it. I had ignored procedure, and people nearly died. Those facts did not arrange themselves into a lesson. Leonard survived, though the cardiac arrests left him with memory gaps and weakness in his right leg. He could recall hiding beneath Dennis's stretcher and escaping through the drainage pipe, but not the drive from St. Vincent to Graham's house. He remembered Owen handing him Dennis's phone. He did not remember who placed Graham's wallet on Dennis's body. He also did not remember cutting the black phone's passcode lock. That detail stayed in the case file. The phone had been unlocked when Mara opened it on Hulton Road. Elise insisted Dennis always used a 6-digit code based on his wedding anniversary. Dennis's wife had died 8 years earlier, but he had never changed it. No usable fingerprints were recovered from the screen. There were too many gloved hands, too much rain, too much handling after the scene fell apart. The authorities considered it minor compared with kidnapping and murder. I did not. 3 months after the funeral home closed, Dennis was buried under his own name. The service took place at a different chapel in Monroeville on a clear February afternoon. Mara attended with her arm out of the sling. I used a cane and sat in the last row near the aisle because I still disliked feeling trapped between people. Graham came in with Elise. He looked smaller than the man in the photograph, though living people often do. A purple scar crossed one side of his forehead. He walked slowly, stopping twice between the door and the front pew. When he reached me, he held out his hand. I stood awkwardly. "Daniel," he said. His voice was the same one that had come through the property bag. Not ghostly, not distorted, just older than I expected. "I'm sorry we brought the wrong man," I said. It was a stupid thing to say. Graham nodded anyway. "I'm sorry you had to bring anyone." After the service, Elise gave Mara the brass key. Investigators no longer needed it. The funeral home's insurance company had changed every lock on the property before selling the building. "You keep it," Mara said. "I don't want it," Elise replied. Neither did we. Eventually, Graham placed it inside Dennis's casket before burial. That should have been the end of it. Ralston and Pike became a dental surgery center the following year. The chapel was divided into treatment rooms. The loading bay became staff parking. The cemetery gate was replaced. Allegheny Valley EMS fired my supervisor after investigators found that maintenance warnings had routinely been marked cleared without documented repairs. The company suspended me for accepting Medic 14 without completing inspection, then offered to reinstate me after rehabilitation. Mara returned before I did. She moved to day shift. I asked whether that was because of the shooting. "No," she said. "Day shift has better food." She still avoids ambulances with powered rear doors. I completed physical therapy in 9 months. My knee never fully straightened again, and cold rain makes the joint ache in advance of weather reports. I went back to driving, but not emergency nights. Now I transport dialysis patients 3 days a week. Same roads, lower speed. People complain about appointment times, clinic temperatures, television channels. They carry blankets and plastic grocery bags with snacks. Ordinary problems. I check every fluid reservoir myself. I photograph maintenance sheets before signing. I inspect beneath the vehicle with a flashlight, even when the pavement is dry and the dispatcher says we are already late. Most crews think I am obsessive. They are correct. Once in a while, we pass the old Ralston and Pike building on Hulton Road. The brick has been painted gray. There's a cheerful sign near the entrance showing a cartoon tooth in sunglasses. The first time my passenger was an 80-year-old man named Mr. Dalka, who slept through the entire route. His oxygen concentrator whispered behind me. The radio played a local call and show about property taxes. Nothing happened. That mattered. Normality had returned, not cleanly, but enough to drive through. A week later, the county released the last of Dennis's personal property to Unease. Inside the sealed inventory were his wallet, reading glasses, keys, peppermint gum, and the black phone. There was also a printed photograph. Unease mailed me a copy. It showed the rear of Medic 14 at Graham's house, taken from inside the living room before we loaded Dennis. Mara stood beside the stretcher. I was near the open ambulance doors. Beneath the chassis, barely visible between the rear tires, someone was lying on the pavement. Not Leonard. The person wore a dark suit. One hand reached toward the brake line. Investigators believed it was Adrian. Adrian denied it. The photograph was too blurred for identification, and its digital metadata had been stripped. That was not the part that kept me awake. In the ambulance's rear window, reflected faintly behind Mara, was a second figure already standing inside the patient compartment. Maybe it was Leonard. Maybe the angle stretched his reflection upright while he climbed beneath the stretcher. Maybe it was one of us. The image was grainy, printed on cheap paper, and enlarged beyond what the pixels could support. I keep it in an envelope inside my desk. I do not show it to people. I do not call it evidence. But sometimes, around 3 a.m, I take it out and look at the rear window. Not because I think something supernatural was inside that ambulance. I know better. What frightens me is simpler. There may have been one more person involved. And after 47 questionable cremations, the police never proved that they found everyone. That's tonight's story. If it gives you chills, make sure to like, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and tap the bell so you never miss what's coming next. And if you're still brave enough, there are more dark tales waiting for you right here on the channel. Go watch another, if you dare. You're listening to Mia Horror Stories, and today's story is I work at a laundromat, and Machine 11 washes clothes from missing people. The screen will stay completely black, letting your imagination do all the work. No visuals, no noise, just a story that creeps under your skin. Don't skip a second, because every detail builds to the chilling end you won't want to miss. The first strange thing Machine 11 did was return 37 cents. Not in the coin tray. That would have been annoying but ordinary. The kind of mechanical hiccup I dealt with twice a week at Midway Wash and Dry. The money came out inside the drum. 3 dimes, a nickel, and 2 pennies rolled between the wet clothes when I opened the round glass door, clicking softly against the perforated steel. The customer standing beside me stared at them. I stared too. The machine had been paid by card. "There," she said. "You see that, right?" I reached into the drum and picked up the coins. They were warm from the wash cycle. One of the pennies was so dark it looked burned. Probably left in somebody's pocket from the last load, I said. The explanation made sense until I remembered that I had wiped the drum myself less than an hour earlier. I didn't tell her that. My name is Daniel Mercer. I was 29 years old then, male, living in a one-bedroom apartment above a vape store in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and working the closing shift at a laundromat because closing shifts came with an extra $1.50 an hour. That mattered more than it sounds. I had medical bills from a bicycle accident the previous winter. A credit card I kept pretending was under control, and a landlord who had recently discovered the phrase market adjustment. The laundromat wasn't where I planned to stay. It was where I could get 40 hours without taking work home with me. At least, that was what I told people. The truth was that I liked jobs with clear edges. A dryer was either heating or it was. A drain was clogged or clear. A floor was dirty, then clean. Machines could be difficult, but they didn't ask what you were doing with your life. People did. The woman whose coins had appeared was Melissa Crane, a 46-year-old woman with rectangular glasses and the restless, irritated energy of someone who expected every inconvenience to become permanent. She came in most Wednesdays after her shift at a dental office on North Avenue. She washed pale blue scrubs, white towels, and clothing for her teenage son, whose socks she routinely blamed for overloading the machines. I checked every pocket, Melissa said. Twice. I believe you. You said they were from the last customer. I said probably. That machine's been acting weird. Machine 11 sat at the far end of the middle row, beside the vending machine that sold detergent in stiff little cardboard boxes. It was a front-loading commercial washer, 25-pound capacity, stainless steel face, faded instructions, and a scrape across the coin panel where someone had once tried to pry it open with a screwdriver. There was nothing visually special about it. Machines 9 through 14 were the same model. I crouched and checked the rubber door seal. A baby sock, 2 bobby pins, or a folded dollar bill could hide in there. The seal held only a few beads of gray water and a strand of red thread. Could have shaken loose from the gasket, I said. Melissa folded her arms. One of the ceiling lights buzzed above us, brightening and dimming by a degree so slight you only noticed it when you stopped moving. The laundromat smelled of hot cotton, powdered detergent, and the bitter electrical dust that came off the dryers when their lint traps hadn't been seated properly. Outside, late October rain polished West Lisbon Avenue black. Tires hissed over the wet street. Every few minutes, the automatic doors gave a tired mechanical sigh as someone entered or left. Melissa looked at the coins in my palm. Keep them, she said. They're yours. They are absolutely not mine. She pulled her wet laundry into a green plastic basket and carried it toward the dryers. I dropped the 37 cents into the lost property jar behind the counter. The jar already contained a brass house key, 4 unmatched earrings, a Canadian quarter, 2 guitar picks, and a small plastic dinosaur with one leg chewed flat. At 8:12 p.m., Machine 11 finished another cycle. Nobody was using it. The end of cycle tone sounded 4 times. Beep, beep, looked up from the crossword puzzle I had been pretending to work on. Machine 11's display had changed from a blank black screen to 3 green zeros. The door remained shut. I waited, thinking someone had started it, and stepped outside. Customers did that. They loaded clothes, paid, then sat in their cars watching videos while I made sure nobody stole their underwear. But there was no laundry visible through the glass. The drum was empty. The display went dark after 10 seconds. Electrical hiccup, Melissa called from the folding tables. Probably. You say probably a lot. It's a versatile word. She almost smiled. The moment passed. I returned to the crossword. 7 letters. A place of temporary safety. I had written shelter, then erased it because it didn't fit. Midway Wash and Dry was open from 6 in the morning until 11 at night. Despite the name, it wasn't halfway between anything useful. It occupied the ground floor of a narrow brick building between a tax preparation office and a convenience store with steel bars over the windows. The owner had installed cameras over the entrances, the change machine, and both rows of washers after someone smashed Dryer 4's glass with a tire iron. The camera system was old but functional. Grainy video, no audio, 14 days of storage if the hard drive behaved. I checked the monitor behind the counter. The feed showed the laundromat from 4 angles. Customers moved in slightly delayed frames. Melissa shook out one of her son's hoodies. An elderly man slept with his chin on his chest near the front windows. A young couple argued silently beside Dryer 18. Machine 11 sat closed and motionless. Normal. That mattered to me. Normal was something I collected in small confirmations. Door locked, camera working, back exit clear, phone charged. I had become like that after the accident. The doctors called it anxiety without committing to the word. I called it being careful. The bicycle crash had happened on an icy side street after sunset. A driver turned across the bike lane, hit me, panicked, and drove away, while I lay beside a snowbank trying to understand why my left hand wouldn't close. No one found the driver. Since then, I checked mirrors, license plates, exit signs. I disliked rooms where I couldn't see the doors. I told myself those habits were sensible. Although sensible habits didn't usually wake you at 3 in the morning with your jaw clenched. At 8:30, my coworker arrived carrying 2 gas station coffees and a paper bag darkened with grease. Her name was Riley Novick, a 24-year-old woman with closely cropped blonde hair, an eyebrow piercing, and a way of walking as though she had already been told to slow down and had rejected the advice. Riley worked 3 nights a week and studied criminal justice at Milwaukee Area Technical College during the day. She had opinions about nearly everything and expressed them with the confidence of someone who had never had to apologize for being wrong, though she frequently was. "I brought dinner," she announced. "You brought fried food into a room full of clean laundry. I brought morale." She placed the bag on the counter. The smell of onion rings immediately pushed aside the detergent. Riley noticed the coins in the lost property jar. Business booming. Machine 11 paid a dividend. I explained what had happened. Melissa, overhearing us, pointed from the dryers. Tell her about the beeping. Machine finished a cycle while it was empty, I said. Riley sipped her coffee. Ghost load. No. Wash cycle for the dead. Still no. Spectral fabric softener. Melissa gave her a disapproving look. Riley lowered her voice. Tough crowd. I opened the paper bag. 2 burgers, onion rings, and enough napkins to suggest the cashier didn't trust us. You paid? I asked. I stole them from an orphan. I'll Venmo you. You said that last time. I did Venmo you last time, 3 days later. That is still a successful transfer. We ate behind the counter while the final hour's customers came and went. Riley told me about a professor who had spent 40 minutes explaining the difference between evidence and assumption, then accused a student of cheating based on vibes. Melissa finished folding her towels into precise rectangles. The sleeping man woke, checked the time, and transferred 1 shirt and 3 pairs of pants into a dryer. For a while, everything settled into the usual rhythm. Coins knocked through metal chutes. Dryer doors thumped shut. Plastic baskets dragged over tile. The television mounted in the corner showed a basketball game with the volume too low to follow. Every machine produced its own mechanical voice, pumps coughing, solenoids clicking, drums turning with a steady wet slap. Machine 11 stayed quiet. At 9:17, Melissa left. At 9:26, the young couple left, still arguing. By 10, only Riley, the elderly man, and I remained. The man's name was Arthur Bell, a 72-year-old man who wore the same brown work jacket every time he came in, regardless of weather. He said he had spent 36 years maintaining elevators in office buildings downtown. He distrusted digital payment systems, teenagers, and any machine built after 1995. Arthur stood in front of dryer 6, watching his clothes turn. That washer over there, he said without looking at us. I followed his gaze. Machine 11. About it, somebody leave something. Not that I know of. Arthur scratched one cheek with a thumbnail. Door was open before. When you two were eating, Riley wiped salt from her fingers. The washer door, Arthur nodded. It's closed now, I said. I know what closed looks like. He wasn't being rude. Arthur spoke that way about everything, as if precision were a moral issue. I walked over to machine 11. The door was latched. The display was blank. I pulled the handle. It opened easily. Inside the drum lay a black glove. Not a winter glove. A thin knit one, inexpensive, wet enough to cling to the steel. I looked back at Riley. Her expression had changed. Not fear, interest. Customer dropped it, she said, into a closed washer. Arthur said the door was open. Arthur lifted both palms, refusing responsibility for whatever conclusion came next. I reached in and removed the glove. It was cold. That was the first detail I couldn't fit neatly into place. The other washers ran warm, and even an idle drum held the room's heat. This glove felt as though it had been left outside in the rain. Water dripped from one fingertip onto the tile. Riley came closer. There's something in it, she said. I squeezed the glove. A hard rectangular object pressed against the palm. We carried it to the counter and laid it on a clean white towel. I worked the object toward the cuff while Riley used a pen to hold the glove open. A plastic card slid out. It was a Wisconsin driver's license. The photo showed a young woman with dark hair tucked behind both ears. Her expression was neutral, almost apologetic. The laminate had begun to peel along one corner, but the text was readable. Erica Dawn Halpern, female, date of birth, February 14, 1998. Address, an apartment on West Center Street. The license had expired 2 months earlier. Riley took out her phone. "Don't," I said. "I'm checking the name." "For what?" "You know what for?" "No, I don't." She typed anyway. Arthur had come over without being invited. He leaned toward the license but didn't touch it. "That hers?" he asked. "Whose?" I said. "The girl from the posters." Riley stopped typing. The television crowd cheered faintly behind us. Somewhere in the rear row, a dryer buckle struck the drum with a repeating metallic tap. Tick, tick, tick. Riley turned her phone so I could see the screen. The search results showed a news article from 8 months earlier. Photograph was the same woman, though in the article she was smiling. Local woman reported missing after failing to return home. I read the first lines twice. Erica Halpern, 26, had last been seen leaving a bar in Milwaukee's River West neighborhood. Her car was found 3 days later near Gordon Park. Police had asked anyone with information to contact the department. Riley looked toward machine 11. "Okay," she said quietly. "That's not nothing. It could have been planted." "By who?" "A customer. Somebody who found it. Somebody messing around. Inside a glove. People are strange," Arthur grunted. "That part's true. I took out my phone but didn't unlock it. The obvious thing was to call the police. A missing woman's identification had turned up in our laundromat. That was the entire decision. There should not have been anything complicated about it. But I imagined the questions. Who found it? When? Was the machine secured? Had we touched the item? Could anyone have entered the building? Could I be certain the glove hadn't been there earlier? The answer to the last one was no. I had checked the drum before Melissa's load, but not after. I had handled the coins, handled the glove, pressed the object through the fabric, moved the license onto a towel beside our dinner. Evidence and assumption. Riley's professor would have enjoyed this. "We should check the cameras first," Riley said. "No. Why not?" "Because we call the police and let them check." "And tell them what?" "A magic washing machine coughed up a missing woman's license." "We don't say magic." "I wasn't planning to." Arthur walked back to his dryer, as if he had reached his weekly limit for involvement. Riley lowered her voice. "Dan, the cops are going to ask where it came from. We can either say we don't know, or we can spend 30 seconds looking at the footage." I looked at the black glove on the towel. A small white mark had been stitched near the cuff. At first, I thought it was lint. Then I saw that it was thread, 3 uneven letters sewn by hand. EH behind us. Machine 11 beeped once. Not the 4-note end of cycle tone. One sharp electronic chirp. The display lit. $2.75. The price of a wash. Its door was still open. Riley and I watched the green numbers hold steady. The laundromat's front doors side apart as the elderly man left with his laundry, though I hadn't seen him approach them. Rain smell entered the room. Wet pavement. Car exhaust. Cold air. Then the doors closed again. Riley pointed toward the security monitor. "Camera 3, she said, On the screen, the angle covering machines 7 through 12 had frozen. The timestamp remained stuck at 10:06:41. The other 3 feeds continued normally. I checked the wall clock. 10:08. Riley picked up the mouse. "Don't touch anything else," I said. "You're the one who wants this to make sense. It can make sense without us contaminating more things. We already ate onion rings beside a missing person's ID. That's exactly my point." Machine 11 beeped again. $2.75. The number did not change. Riley looked at me, waiting. The practical choice was to call the police immediately and leave the footage alone. The other choice was to rewind camera 3 by 2 minutes and find out who had opened the washer door. I held my phone in one hand. Riley held the mouse in hers. Between us, the wet glove continued dripping onto the towel, each drop spreading into the cloth and disappearing. "Your call," she said. I looked at the frozen timestamp. 10:06:41. Then at machine 11. Its empty drum was slowly turning. I called the police. Riley still had her hand on the mouse when I did it, and for half a second she looked offended, like I had answered a question she thought belonged to both of us. "What are you doing?" she asked. "What we should have done 2 minutes ago." I stepped away from the counter and gave the dispatcher the laundromat's address. My voice sounded too formal in my own ears. I said we had found identification belonging to a missing person inside a washing machine. I explained that nobody had claimed the glove, that the camera covering the machine had frozen, and that we had handled both items before realizing what they were. The dispatcher asked whether anyone threatening was inside the business. "No. Do you see anyone outside who appears to be watching the building?" I turned toward the front windows. Rain streaked the glass, breaking the streetlights into pale orange smears. The convenience store next door had 2 customers at the register. A city bus pulled away from the stop across Lisbon Avenue, its tires spraying water against the curb. "No," I said. "Are the doors secured?" The automatic entrance doors were unlocked. So was the rear employee exit, because local fire code required the panic bar to remain usable from inside. "The front doors lock from the counter," I said. "The back door is closed. Do not touch the property again. Do not review or alter the recording. Officers are being dispatched." "How long?" "They'll arrive as soon as a unit is available." That could mean 6 minutes or 40. Milwaukee police had more urgent things to do than inspect a glove in a laundromat. I understood that. Understanding it didn't make the room feel any smaller. I ended the call. Riley released the mouse. Happy? No. Good, because camera 3's still frozen. Machine 11's drum had stopped turning. Its door remained open by 3 inches. I had not seen it stop. "We should close," I said. "We're already closing." "I mean now, lock the front doors." "What about customers?" "There aren't any." Riley glanced toward the dryer row. Arthur's clothes were gone, but dryer 6 was still spinning. Through the glass, the drum turned empty, the buckle that had been tapping against the metal no longer inside. Tick, tick, tick. The sound continued. Riley walked toward it. "Don't," I said. She stopped and looked back. "Don't what walk? Just stay where I can see you." The words came out sharper than I meant. Her face changed in a small way. Not hurt, irritation. I'm not 12, Dan. I know. Then stop talking to me like I'm about to stick a fork in an outlet. I rubbed the scar across the heel of my left hand, a pale, raised line from the bicycle accident. When I was anxious, the scar itched even when it wasn't irritated. I want the doors locked, I said. Riley studied me for another moment, then went to the front entrance and keyed the lock control beneath the counter. The automatic doors shuttered inward until the magnetic latch caught. She flipped the sign from open to closed. The red neon open sign stayed lit. It's on a timer, she said. I know. Just mentioning it. Outside, the glowing red letters reflected backward across the glass. NEPO. Riley returned to the counter and leaned over the black glove without touching it. Police asked us not to look at the footage. Yes. Specifically, yes. That's inconvenient. It's evidence. It's a security recording in our workplace. It could be both. The washers along the middle row sat with their circular doors reflecting strips of ceiling light. For the first time that night, I noticed how many of them had dark glass. If someone crouched behind the row, I wouldn't see them from the counter. I checked the security monitor again. Cameras 1, 2, and 4 showed live feeds. Camera 1 covered the front entrance. Camera 2 covered the dryers and folding tables. Camera 4 covered the hallway leading to the restroom, supply closet, utility room, and rear exit. Camera 3 still displayed 10:06:41. The image showed machine 11 closed. That was wrong. The door was open now. On the frozen recording, Riley and I stood behind the counter, both looking down at something. The glove, probably. Arthur was visible near dryer 6 with his back turned. Nobody stood near machine 11. I looked at the live clock. 10:14. How long did dispatch say? Riley asked. They didn't. So 30 minutes. You don't know that. I've called about fights here. 30 minutes is optimistic. She was right, which made me resent the way she said it. A low buzzing started beneath the machines. Not electrical, mechanical. The drain pump. Machine 11's display flashed once. Then washer 10 lit up. Then washer 12. Green digits appeared across all 3 panels. 2.75. 2.75. 2.75. Riley straightened. That's new. The 3 machines clicked in sequence. Clack, clack, clack. Their door locks engaged. Machine 11's door jerked inward, trying to latch despite being partly open. It struck the frame and bounced back. Again. Clack. The door pulled, hit metal, released. The black rubber gasket folded under the edge. I moved toward the wall breaker panel. Riley blocked me. Don't kill the power. Why? The police are coming. You shut everything down. You erase whatever the machines are doing. I'm not letting the motor run with the door open. It isn't running. The drain pump buzz deepened beneath our feet. I could feel it through the tile. Then water began seeping from under machine 11. A thin gray line at first. It crawled across the grout toward the folding tables. Okay, Riley said, kill it. I opened the breaker panel in the utility hall. Each row of machines had its own labeled circuit. The handwriting on the chart had faded, but washers 9 through 12 were grouped under 2 switches. I flipped both. The overhead lights stayed on. Washers 10 and 12 went dark. Machine 11 did not. Its display continued flashing $2.75. The pump kept running. That shouldn't happen, I said. Riley stood several feet behind me. Battery backup. Washers don't have battery backups. Separate breaker. Not according to this. Water spread faster. It smelled wrong. Laundromat drain water usually smelled like detergent and damp lint. This had a sour, stagnant odor, like water trapped in a basement floor drain all summer. Riley grabbed the yellow caution, wet floor sign, and placed it near the expanding puddle. "That'll protect us," she said. "Get the mop." "I'm joking. Get it anyway." The rear supply closet held mops, bleach, trash bags, and a wet vacuum that worked only when the cord was bent upward near the plug. Riley went to retrieve it while I crouched near Machine 11, careful not to touch the door. The water was cold. It carried fine black particles that settled into the grout lines. Something red clung to the edge of the puddle. Thread. A short piece, the same dark red as the strand I had found in the door gasket earlier. I stood. Riley, no answer. I turned toward the hallway. The supply closet door was open. The light inside was on. Riley, the wet vacuum, rolled out first. She pulled it behind her with one hand. In the other, she held a backpack. It was small, dark blue, and soaked through. "Where was that?" I asked. "Behind the mop sink." "You've seen it before." "No." The backpack dripped onto the hallway floor. One shoulder strap had been cut cleanly through. "Put it down," I said. "I'm not touching it with my skin." She had wrapped her hand in a clear trash bag. "That isn't the point." "What point?" "The police said not to touch anything. They said not to touch the glove. They said the property. This was hidden in our closet, Dan. Put it down." Riley lowered it onto the tile. The bag sagged sideways. A plastic luggage tag was attached to the zipper pull. The paper insert had dissolved into pulp, but one word remained visible beneath the cloudy plastic. "Maya." Riley and I looked at each other. "Could be anyone," she said. I didn't reply. She took out her phone and typed the name along with Milwaukee and missing. "That's not enough to search," I said. "It's a start." The wet vacuum's wheels rolled slightly on the sloped floor and bumped against her ankle. Her phone loaded the results. The first page showed several unrelated names. A realtor, a high school athlete, a missing dog. Then Riley stopped scrolling. "Oh, what?" She turned the screen toward me. A local television station had published the article 11 days earlier. 19-year-old MATC student missing after leaving evening class. The photograph showed a young woman with tightly curled hair and a silver stud in her nose. Her name was Maya Ellison. She had last been seen near the MATC downtown Milwaukee campus at approximately 8:40 p.m. Her phone had gone offline later that night. Riley read the article silently. "I know her," she said. The words were so quiet I almost missed them. "What do you mean? Not know her, know her? I've seen her." "Where? School? Criminal Justice Building, maybe? Or Student Center?" "You're sure?" "No." Riley zoomed in on the photograph. "I think she was in Professor Hanley's evidence class last semester." The drain pump beneath Machine 11 made a grinding noise. Water surged out from under the washer, wider now, pushing a dark wave across the tile. I grabbed the wet vacuum. "Call the dispatcher back," I said. Tell them we found another item. Riley dialed while I plugged in the vacuum. The motor coughed and started with a shrill whine. I pushed the nozzle through the water, but the machine filled faster than it could drain into the tank. Riley pressed the phone harder to her ear. "Hold," she mouthed. The puddle reached the base of dryer 15. I unplugged the wet vacuum. The dryer row had powered outlets beneath it. Water and electricity were not a theoretical combination I wanted to test. "We need the main shutoff," I said. "Where?" "Basement." Riley covered the phone microphone. "There's a basement. Utility access. Landlord keeps it locked." "Of course he does." I called the owner, Mr. Kessler. Voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. The laundromat occupied one half of the building's ground floor, but the water service and main electrical disconnect were in a shared basement accessed through a steel door in the rear alley. Mr. Kessler had the key. A duplicate was supposed to be in the emergency lockbox mounted beside the back exit. I had never opened it. The pump grinding became louder. Riley finally reached the dispatcher and explained the backpack. The questions came quickly. Where exactly had it been located? Had we opened it? Was anyone else inside? Had we checked the restrooms? At that, Riley looked toward the hallway. The restroom door was closed. Neither of us had checked it since Arthur left. "No," she said into the phone. "We haven't. The dispatcher told us not to search the premises. Officers had been notified of the updated circumstances. We were instructed to leave the building if we believed someone else was inside." "Can we wait outside?" Riley asked. A pause. "If you can exit safely without approaching a suspected person." Riley ended the call. "Outside," she said. Now I looked at the water. It had reached the hallway entrance. If we leave that pump running, the place could flood. That is Mr. Kessler's problem. It's our problem if the water reaches the outlets. Then we call the fire department. Police are already coming. That doesn't make police electricians." She was right again. I hated that. The wet backpack lay near the supply closet. Machine 11 continued operating despite the breakers being off. The red thread floated in the spreading water, turning slowly in the current. I heard a sound from the rear of the laundromat. A heavy metallic knock. Riley stopped speaking. It came again, not from the restroom, from the back door. 3 knocks, evenly spaced. Someone was in the alley. Riley moved toward the security monitor. Camera 4 showed the rear hallway and the inside of the exit door, but not the alley beyond it. The door's narrow wired glass window appeared black. 3 more knocks. I took out my phone. "Police," I called through the laundromat. "They might be here," Riley frowned. They'd come to the front. The person knocked again. Then a man's voice came through the door. "Daniel." My hand tightened around the phone. Riley looked at me. "Who is that?" "I don't know." The voice came again, muffled by steel. "Daniel Mercer. Open up. Building maintenance." I had never met the building's maintenance contractor. I had also never told dispatch my last name. At least, I didn't remember telling them. Riley whispered, "Do not open that door." The man outside pulled the handle once. The door held. "Water alarm went off," he called. "You've got a pump failure. I need basement access." A water alarm was plausible. The building was old, and Kessler had once mentioned leak sensors near the boilers. "What company?" I called. No answer. I waited. What company are you with? The handle moved again. Harder this time. Riley backed toward the counter. She picked up the metal flashlight we kept beneath the register. The man outside said, "Your shutoff is downstairs. You've got maybe 10 minutes before it reaches the dryer circuits." That was exactly what I was afraid of. Not a stranger at the door. The water, the outlets, the possibility that hesitation would turn an equipment failure into a fire. The scar on my left palm began to itch so badly I scraped it against my jeans. Riley saw. "That could be whoever put the bag here," she said. "How would he know about the leak? He could have caused it. From outside, Dan," the pump shrieked. Machine 11's drum began turning again. Slowly at first. The door was still not fully latched. Water flicked from the gasket in short bursts. "Main shutoff," the man called. "Emergency box. Code is 1804. I stared at the gray lockbox mounted inside the rear hall. Mr. Kessler had never given me the code. Riley read my expression. "Is that the right code?" "I don't know. That's not an answer. I've never used it." The puddle touched the metal leg of dryer 15. A blue spark snapped beneath the machine. Both of us jumped back. The dryer stopped. The ceiling lights flickered. For less than a second, the laundromat went dark. When the lights returned, camera 4 was frozen. Its timestamp read 10:21:03. Camera 3 remained frozen at 10:06:41. Only cameras 1 and 2 were still live. The man outside knocked once more. "Open the lockbox," he said. "Take the key. I'll meet you at the basement door." Riley gripped the flashlight with both hands. "We go out the front," she said, "and leave the power on. We're not going into an alley with a stranger. We don't have to let him in. We use the key ourselves. You heard him say he'd meet us downstairs. The basement door is outside. We need the key. We need the police." A siren sounded in the distance. It grew louder for several seconds, then faded as it passed south on another street. The water continued spreading. I looked toward the front entrance. Going outside through the front was safer. We could wait beneath the convenience store awning and call the fire department. By the time anyone shut off the building, the laundromat might be flooded. But no property was worth walking into an alley with an unknown man. That was the sensible decision. Then every remaining dryer shut off at once. The room lost its constant mechanical hum. In the sudden quiet, we heard something moving inside the restroom. A scrape, a soft impact against the door. Riley's eyes shifted toward the hallway. The restroom handle turned, stopped, turned again. Someone was inside. We stood between the two exits. A stranger waited at the rear door. The front doors were locked, and the restroom door had just begun to open. The restroom door opened 4 inches and stopped against something on the floor. Riley lifted the flashlight. "Police," she shouted. No answer. The door shifted again. A wet hand appeared around its edge, not reaching, just hanging there. The fingers were pale beneath the fluorescent lights, the nails dark with grime, and for 1 second my brain refused to arrange them into anything ordinary. They looked detached, placed there like a prop. Then the hand moved. "Help," a man said. The word came out thin and scraped raw. Riley aimed the flashlight beam through the gap. I moved left so I could see down the hallway without standing directly in front of the door. The laundromat's rear section was narrow and badly designed. From the main room, the hallway ran 12 feet past the restroom on the right and supply closet on the left, then ended at the utility room and rear exit. The restroom door opened outward into that corridor. With the wet backpack on the floor and water spreading across the threshold, there was barely enough clear space for one person to pass. "Us both hands," Riley called. The pale hand disappeared. A man groaned from inside. "I can't." Riley looked at me. "Could be bait," she whispered. "Could be injured." "That's what bait sounds like." The rear door rattled again. "Daniel," the man outside called. "You need to move now." The voice inside the restroom answered with a startled cry. That reaction sounded real. I edged forward. "Who are you?" I asked. "Name's Lewis." "What are you doing in there, cleaning?" "At 10 at night. I work for Kessler." The man outside stopped knocking. Riley caught that too. "You know the person in the alley?" she asked. "No," the answer came immediately. Too immediately, maybe. "What happened to you?" I said. "I fell, my ankle." Water reached the restroom doorway and flowed around the wet backpack in 2 shallow streams. The black particles collected against the rubber sole of Riley's shoe. Machine 11 ground behind us. Its drum made one full turn, then another. "Come out slowly," I said. "Keep your hands where we can see them." "I told you, I can't stand." Riley lowered the flashlight slightly. "We need to leave, not with someone hurt in there. We call paramedics from outside. He might be blocking the door because he collapsed. That isn't our fault." The sentence hit harder than she intended. I could tell from the way she closed her mouth afterward. During the bicycle accident, 6 cars had passed before anyone stopped. I remembered their tires cutting through dirty snow. I remembered one driver slowing, looking at me through the passenger window, then continuing through the intersection. Not their fault, maybe not, but I still remembered the taillights. I pushed the restroom door. It moved another inch, then caught. "Lewis, I'm going to open it." "Okay." Riley grabbed my sleeve. "Dan, if he reaches for me, hit him." "With what?" I looked at the flashlight. "Oh," she said, "great plan." I put my shoulder against the door and pushed harder. Something scraped across the tile inside. The door opened enough for us to see a man sitting on the floor beside the toilet. He appeared to be in his late 50s, heavyset, wearing navy work pants and a gray sweatshirt stained dark at the chest. His left leg was stretched out. His right was bent beneath him at a bad angle. For a moment, I thought the dark stain was blood. Then the smell reached us. Coffee. A crushed paper cup lay beside the sink. The wet hand had been pale because it was covered in cleaning foam. The misdirection collapsed so quickly that relief almost made me dizzy. Luis Ortega was a 58-year-old man who identified himself as male and said he worked as a part-time cleaner for the building owner. He had a broad, tired face, a gray mustache, and the embarrassed anger of someone who had been injured doing a job he believed should have been simple. His right ankle was already swelling above a worn leather boot. "I slipped," he said. "Floor was wet." "How long have you been in here?" Riley asked. 10 minutes, maybe 15. "Why didn't you call out?" "I did. We didn't hear you. The dryers." That was plausible. Before they shut down, the room had been loud enough to bury a voice. I crouched outside the doorway. "Did you see the backpack in the closet?" "What backpack?" "Blue, wet, Louis shook his head. What were you cleaning? Toilet, sink. Same as every Wednesday. You come every Wednesday. After 10. Riley pointed toward the rear exit. There's a man outside claiming he's maintenance. Louis stared at her. What man? He knows the lockbox code. Louis's expression changed. Not fear exactly. Recognition followed by caution. What code? 1804. Louis swore under his breath. What? I asked. That was old code. How old? Before Kessler changed the box. Last winter. The rear door handle jerked hard enough to make the metal flex. Open up, the man called. You're running out of time. Louis looked toward the sound. You know him? Riley asked. No, you're sure? Yes. Who knew the old code? Louis hesitated. Kessler, me, maintenance guys, contractors. How many contractors? He rubbed his face. I don't know, many. The water had reached my shoes. Cold soaked through the mesh near my toes. Attempt 1 had been to identify the person in the restroom and clear an escape route. Instead, we now had an injured man who couldn't walk, an unknown person at the rear door, and confirmation that the stranger knew an outdated building code. Riley called emergency services again. This time the call failed before connecting. No ring, just a message on the screen. Call failed. She tried again. Same result. I checked my phone. 1 bar, then none. That storm isn't bad enough to kill service, she said. We're inside a brick building. We had service 5 minutes ago. The Wi-Fi icon remained active, but when she opened a browser, the page would not load. The security monitor flickered. Camera 1 showing the front doors, filled with horizontal lines. Then it returned. The entrance appeared empty. We go out the front, Riley said. We carry him. Louis shook his head. Don't touch the leg. We can drag you on a blanket. I'm 260 pounds. We'll manage. No, you won't. He wasn't boasting. He was right. The restroom was too narrow to maneuver 2 people beside him, and dragging him across wet tile risked worsening the injury. If the ankle was fractured, twisting it under his weight could drive bone through skin. We need the fire department, I said. We need a phone that works, Riley answered. The landline beneath the counter was connected through the building's internet modem. I lifted the receiver anyway. No dial tone. Front exit, Riley said again. This became attempt 2. I took the flashlight. Riley grabbed a wool moving blanket from the folding shelf, and together we left Louis propped against the restroom wall with his phone in his hand. His device showed no signal either. The main room looked different now. Without the dryers, it had lost its background motion. The rows of machines stood silent, except for washer 11. Water had spread from the middle row toward both the front windows and the rear hall, following the slight slope in the tile. The center aisle remained passable if we stepped along the raised rubber mats. We moved from the hallway into the main room, keeping the counter on our right and the washer row on our left. The front doors were 40 feet away. Riley reached the lock control beneath the counter and pressed it. Nothing happened. She pressed it again. The magnetic lock clicked, but did not release. Manual override, I said. Where? Top of the door frame. The emergency release was mounted above the right-hand sliding panel, nearly 9 feet up. Normally, we used a narrow aluminum step stool kept beside the detergent vending machine. The stool was gone. I looked toward machine 11. The vending machine stood beside it. The floor in that area was covered by several inches of water. Riley followed my gaze. No, we need the stool. We find something else. The plastic chairs near the windows were too flimsy. The folding tables were bolted to the floor. Laundry cart might work, but its wire basket sat on casters and would roll the moment someone climbed into it. We brace the cart, I said. With what? The counter. We pushed one of the tall laundry carts against the front counter. The wheels slid on the wet tile until I locked two of them with my shoes. Riley climbed into the wire basket. The cart shifted. Hold it, she said. I am. She stood carefully, one hand gripping the top rail, and reached toward the emergency release. Still too low. Jump, I said. She looked down at me. That is the worst thing you've said tonight. Can you reach? No. A sharp bang came from the rear hallway. Lewis yelled. Riley dropped back into the cart, and one wheel rolled over my foot. Pain shot through my toes. I shoved the cart away and limped toward the hallway. Lewis, I'm okay, he called. Door moved. The rear exit bulged inward again. The stranger was forcing it. The deadbolt held, but the upper hinge had begun pulling away from the frame. Fine plaster dust trickled down the wall. Riley joined me, breathing hard. He's not maintenance, she said. No, behind us, the front doors opened 3 inches. We both turned. For one hopeful second, I thought Riley had triggered the release. Then the panels slid shut again. The motor whined, opened 3 inches, closed. The automatic sensor was detecting something outside. A shape moved beyond the rain-streaked glass. Someone stood near the entrance. I raised the flashlight. The beam reflected off the window and blinded us. Police, Riley called. No answer. The shape moved closer. A face appeared between the red glow of the open sign and the glass. Melissa. Her hair was plastered to her forehead. She held her phone in one hand and pounded on the door with the other. Riley exhaled so hard it sounded like a laugh. I crossed the room, limping. Melissa shouted through the glass, but the storm and door motors swallowed most of her words. What? I called. She held up a pale blue scrub top, then pointed toward machine 11. The automatic doors opened their 3 inches again. Melissa shoved her fingers into the gap. Stop, I yelled. The panels closed against her hand. She screamed and pulled back. The safety sensor reversed the motor. The doors slid open 6 inches this time. Riley rushed over and wedged the metal flashlight between them. The panels pressed against it, clicked, and reopened. Push, she said. I grabbed the edge of the left panel. Melissa pulled from outside. The motor fought us. We gained another inch. Then the red open sign went dark. Every ceiling light blinked off. Machine 11 continued running. In the darkness, the front doors stopped moving. The flashlight clattered to the floor, but remained wedged between the panels. Emergency lights came on above the exits, weak amber boxes that turned everyone's face gray. Melissa's fingers appeared through the gap. Something S in my shirt, she said. What? She tried to pass the scrub top through. A photograph was pinned to the fabric, not printed on ordinary paper. It looked like a missing person flyer cut down to the size of an index card and sealed beneath clear tape. The face on it belonged to a middle-aged man. Melissa shoved the shirt harder until the fabric cleared the gap. Riley took it. The wet material smelled strongly of bleach. Across the photograph, someone had written an address in black marker: 3127 North 24 TH Street. Below it was a time: 10:45. I checked my phone: 10:34, 11 minutes. Where did this come from? I asked. Dryer, Melissa said. I got home, opened my basket, and it was inside the shirt. Did anyone follow you? I don't know. A horn sounded from the street. Melissa looked behind her. A white cargo van had stopped at the curb with no headlights. Its side door slid open. Riley grabbed Melissa's wrist through the gap. Get inside. The stranger at the rear door slammed into it again. The upper hinge cracked. At the same moment, Machine 11's drain hose tore free beneath the washer. Water burst across the floor in a hard, pressurized stream. It struck the base of the detergent vending machine, then arced toward the front row of electrical outlets. Lewis shouted from the restroom. The van door remained open. Someone stepped onto the pavement. Riley pulled Melissa's arm. I reached through the door gap and caught the shoulder of her raincoat. The flashlight wedged between the sliding panels bent with a metallic groan. Then the glass door motor surged. The panel slammed inward. The flashlight snapped. The doors closed on Melissa's coat, pinning the fabric while leaving her body outside. She screamed. Riley and I pulled. The coat tore beneath my hand. Melissa fell backward onto the wet sidewalk. The figure from the van started toward her. I rammed my fingers into the door gap and tried to force it open. Behind us, the rear exit gave way. The top hinge ripped out of the wall. The steel door dropped inward at an angle, blocking the hallway and cutting off access to Lewis. Cold alley air rushed into the laundromat. The unknown man stepped over the broken threshold. He wore a dark rain jacket and held something long and metal at his side. Riley turned toward him. Machine 11's hose continued blasting water into the room. A shower of sparks erupted beneath the vending machine. The front lights flashed once, bright white. Then all power died. The automatic doors locked solid. Melissa was outside with the person from the van. Lewis was trapped behind the fallen rear door, and the man from the alley stood inside with us. There was no longer an exit we could reach. The man from the alley stepped into the emergency light. The long metal object in his hand was a pry bar. That should have made me feel better than a gun would have. He was in his 40s, maybe early 50s, with rain flattened across his hair and a dark jacket zipped to the throat. Water ran from his sleeves. He looked past Riley and me toward Machine 11 as if we were clutter between him and the thing he had come for. Move away from the counter, he said. His voice was the same one from outside. Riley held the broken flashlight by its thicker half. The snapped aluminum edge looked jagged enough to cut. What do you want? She asked. The bag, the glove, the card. He knew exactly what we had found. I looked toward the rear hallway. The collapsed door lay diagonally across it, its top edge pressed against the wall, bottom corner jammed beneath the utility room frame. Lewis was somewhere behind it. The intruder raised the pry bar, put them on the floor. Riley shifted closer to me. Outside, Melissa hit the glass with both palms. The figure from the van reached her. He grabbed her by the arm. She twisted hard and struck him across the face with her laundry basket. Plastic cracked against bone. He staggered sideways, but he didn't let go. "Melissa," I shouted. The man inside glanced toward the front windows. That was his mistake. Riley threw the broken flashlight. It hit him just below the eye. He flinched and lifted one hand. I charged. I had not been in a fight since middle school. There was no technique in it, no clean punch. I hit him with my shoulder and drove him backward into washer 13. The pry bar struck the tile. He punched me behind the ear. White light burst across my vision. My knees loosened. Riley grabbed the metal bar. The man kicked her in the stomach. She fell against the washer door, folded forward, and made a choking sound. He reached for the pry bar. I caught his jacket and pulled. The fabric tore at the shoulder. Something dropped from inside it. A ring of keys. One key had a red plastic cap. Another was tagged with a strip of white tape marked 11. The man saw me see it. His face changed. He drove his elbow into my mouth. My lower lip split against my teeth. I tasted blood and detergent water. He shoved me down. My injured hand hit the tile first. Pain climbed from my palm to my elbow. The man lunged for the keys. Riley got there before him. She kicked them under the laundry cart. "Stupid," he said. Then he grabbed her by the hair. Riley screamed, seized the yellow wet floor sign, and swung it like a shovel. The plastic edge struck his wrist. His grip opened. Riley dropped and crawled away. The intruder came at me with both hands. I backed into the counter. The cash drawer dug into my spine. He smelled like wet wool and cigarette smoke. "Where's the license?" he said. I spat blood onto the floor. He hit me in the ribs. Once. Twice. The second blow landed under my left arm. Something inside me seemed to click. Breathing became shallow and sharp. He pulled me upright by the shirt. "Where?" "Lost property jar." His eyes moved toward the shelf. The jar was there. So was the glove. The license lay on the towel beside it. He released me and reached across the counter. Riley came up behind him with the pry bar. She swung at his leg. Metal struck the side of his knee. The sound was dull, heavy. The man collapsed with a shout. Riley froze, shocked by what she had done. He rolled onto his back and kicked her ankle. She went down. I grabbed the jar, not to protect the license, to use the weight. I smashed it against the counter edge. Glass broke around the lost key, earrings, coins, guitar picks, and plastic dinosaur. I kept the thick base in my hand. The intruder tried to stand. His right leg folded beneath him. He reached inside his jacket. Riley yelled, "Gun." There wasn't time to see if she was right. I drove the broken jar base into his forearm. Glass cut through the sleeve. He screamed and struck me across the face with the back of his hand. I fell beside the cart. His hand came out of the jacket, holding a folding knife. 3-inch blade, black handle, still enough. Riley dragged herself backward. The man pushed up on one knee. The front windows shook. Melissa's attacker had forced her against the glass. She clawed at his wrist while he tried to pull her toward the van. The digital clock above the counter flickered back to life. 10:43, 2 minutes before the time written on the photograph. The intruder followed my eyes. "You have no idea what you found," he said. He sounded angry now, but beneath that was panic. "What's at the address?" Riley asked. "Nothing." "Who's Maya?" He hesitated. "Half a second, enough." Riley saw it. "You know her." "Shut up." "Where is she?" He lifted the knife. Machine 11 began filling. No lights, no functioning controls, but water rushed into its drum. The door, still partly open, leaked down the front in sheets. The intruder turned toward it. "Damn it." Crawled toward the keys beneath the cart. I understood then. Not everything, but enough. Machine 11 wasn't malfunctioning. It had been altered. A separate power feed, a separate water line, a key for the cabinet. Somebody had been using it independently of the laundromat's controls. Riley understood too. "The basement," she said. "There's another circuit." The man slashed at her. She pulled back, but the blade caught her forearm. Her sleeve opened, then her skin. Blood appeared in a fast red line. Riley stared at it. The intruder grabbed the keys. I slammed the cart into him. The wire basket struck his shoulder and pinned him against the washer row. He stabbed through the gaps. The knife tip caught my thigh. It felt like being punched with something hot. Then the pain widened. My leg gave way. I fell against the cart, keeping my weight on it. "Go," I told Riley. She clutched her arm. "Where?" "Front door release." The power had flickered. Maybe enough systems had reset. She limped toward the front. The intruder shoved against the cart. My injured thigh slid on the wet floor. I could not hold him long. He reached through the wire and cut my shirt. The blade scraped my ribs. I pushed harder. Behind the collapsed rear door, Lewis shouted, "Move away." A second later, the steel door jerked. Lewis was using something from the other side. A mop handle appeared beneath its edge. He levered upward. The door shifted half an inch again. Lewis groaned with effort. The lower corner lifted enough for black water to rush beneath it. The intruder heard him. "Lewis," he shouted. "Stop." Lewis went still. "You know him," I said. The intruder looked at me. There it was, recognition, not strangers, not random contractors. Lewis pushed again. The door rose another inch. The intruder thrust the knife through the cart at my stomach. I twisted. The blade entered my side, shallow but real. Air left me. My grip loosened. He shoved the cart away and crawled toward machine 11. Riley reached the front doors. The control panel was dead. She looked up toward the emergency release. Still too high. Then she saw the laundry basket outside. Melissa had dropped it near the glass. Riley dragged the front laundry cart beneath the release, locked all 4 wheels, and climbed. The cart rocked. She nearly fell. She reached with her uninjured arm. Too low. "Riley," I shouted. The intruder had opened the service panel beneath machine 11 with the red capped key. Inside was a nest of wires, tubing, and a small cellular router mounted to the metal frame. That explained the independent signal. Maybe the camera failures too. He ripped at the router. I crawled toward him. My right leg dragged. Blood mixed with the floodwater and disappeared. He saw me and kicked my injured thigh. The room narrowed. I heard myself make a sound. I did not recognize. He pulled a cable free. Machine 11 stopped filling. The drum clicked. Something released inside it, not clothing. A waterproof plastic pouch dropped from behind the upper housing into the drum. The man opened the washer door and reached for it. I grabbed his bad knee. He struck me with the knife handle. Once, twice. The second blow opened the skin above my eyebrow. I held on. He tried to kick free. His knee failed. He fell across the open washer door. The hinge bent under his weight. Riley jumped inside the laundry cart. The basket slammed downward, springs and wires flexing. Her fingertips caught the emergency release cord. She pulled. The front doors unlocked with a loud mechanical clunk. Outside, Melissa heard it. She drove her heel into her attacker's shin and threw herself backward. The sliding doors separated 3 inches. Riley jumped down and forced her fingers into the gap. Melissa pushed from outside. Together, they opened it wider. The man from the van grabbed Melissa's coat again. This time she slipped out of it completely. She came through the gap wearing only her scrub top and jeans. Riley slammed the door panel against the attacker's wrist. He yelled and released her. Melissa fell inside. The van driver turned and ran back toward the curb. Riley tried to follow. Her bleeding arm failed when she pushed on the door. "Let him go," Melissa said, gasping. "Let him go." At the washers, the intruder tore the waterproof pouch from the drum. I pulled his leg again. He stabbed downward. The blade entered the back of my hand. For a second, we both stared at it. Then instinct took over. I twisted my wrist. The knife came free from his grip, but remained lodged through the flesh between 2 bones. The pain was bright and nauseating. I used the hand anyway. I grabbed the pouch. He grabbed it too. The plastic stretched, split. Contents spilled into the water. Driver's licenses, student IDs, credit cards, small photographs, SIM cards sealed in tiny bags, a silver nose stud. Riley saw it. "Maya," she said. The intruder let go of the pouch and reached for the loose items. Riley came at him with the pry bar again. This time she didn't swing. She placed the end against his throat and leaned her weight into it. "Don't move." He looked up at her. "You won't do it." Riley's face had gone pale. Blood ran from her sleeve to her fingertips. "No," she said, "but he might." Lewis stood behind the intruder. He had forced enough of the rear door aside to crawl through. His right ankle was swollen nearly twice its normal size. He supported himself with a mop handle and held a heavy pipe wrench in his other hand. The intruder stared at him. Lewis struck him across the temple. Not hard enough to kill him, hard enough. The man collapsed face first into the shallow water. Riley released the pry bar. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Melissa screamed, not from fear. Outside, the white van was pulling away from the curb. Its side door remained open. Inside, under the weak streetlight, I saw a person lying on the floor, bound hands. A face turned toward us. A young woman. Riley ran. She made it 3 steps before her ankle buckled. Melissa went instead. She pushed through the damaged doors and into the rain, waving both arms at the traffic. A sedan swerved and stopped sideways across Lisbon Avenue. The van braked. Another car struck its rear quarter panel. Metal folded. The van spun into the curb. Its open side door slammed against a parking meter and tore backward. The driver stumbled out and ran south. Melissa pointed. Girl in the van. People emerged from the convenience store. A man in a packer's jacket reached the van first. Another customer called 911 from the sidewalk, where his phone had service. Riley sat in the doorway, clutching her arm. Lewis lowered himself against a dryer. I looked at the man unconscious in the water, then at the loose identification cards around machine 11. Some had faces I recognized from news searches. Some I did not. The digital clock changed. 10:45. From somewhere inside the exposed service panel, a small red light blinked once, then went dark. Police arrived 4 minutes later. By then, the woman in the van was breathing. The intruder was still alive, and I could no longer feel the fingers of my left hand. The paramedic cut the knife out of my hand in the laundromat. Not pulled it out, cut it out. The blade had entered through the back of my left hand and lodged between the metacarpal bones. Every time I moved, the handle shifted slightly, scraping against something deeper. The paramedic wrapped my wrist to a plastic board, then used heavy shears to separate the folding knife's handle from the blade so they could move me without it catching on the stretcher. He was calm about it. That helped. "Don't look," he said. I looked anyway. The handle dropped into an evidence bag. The blade remained in my hand, like a strip of black metal growing from the skin. Across the room, police officers pushed customers and bystanders toward the front windows, while firefighters shut off the building's electrical service. Their boots sent little waves through the floodwater. Red emergency lights moved over the machines, the folding tables, the wet clothes Melissa had dropped outside. Machine 11 sat with its service panel open. Once the power was cut at the building main, it finally stopped. That was how I knew the separate feed wasn't magic. It was just hidden well. Riley was on the floor near the front doors, with gauze pressed to her forearm. She kept trying to answer an officer's questions, while another paramedic told her to stop talking. "I'm fine," she said. "You're bleeding through the dressing. I can do 2 things." "No, you can't." Melissa sat inside the convenience store next door, wrapped in a silver emergency blanket. Through the rain-streaked window, I could see her staring at the cargo van. Lewis had been placed on a different stretcher. His boot had been cut away, revealing an ankle that looked wrong even from across the room. He caught me watching and lifted one hand. Not a wave exactly, more of an acknowledgement that we were both still there. The intruder was taken out in handcuffs after he regained consciousness. His name was Wade Mercer. No relation to me. That coincidence complicated the first hour of questioning, because an officer heard the surname and briefly thought I had known him. I didn't. I had never seen him before that night. Wade was 48, male, and had worked for a commercial laundry repair company that serviced Midway Wash and Dry until the owner terminated the contract 18 months earlier. He had installed and repaired most of the washer row. He knew the building's old emergency code, the basement layout, the camera wiring, and the blind spots around the rear alley. He also knew exactly how to make a machine look broken without making it unusable. The second man, the one driving the van, was arrested the following afternoon at his sister's apartment in Waukesha County. His name was Eric Danner, 39, male. He had worked intermittently as a tow truck driver, building porter, and private security guard. Police found Melissa's torn coat in the van, along with zip ties, 2 prepaid phones, a stun gun, and several plastic storage tubs. The woman rescued from the van was Maya Ellison. Riley had recognized her correctly. Maya was hospitalized for dehydration, a concussion, bruising around both wrists, and exposure. She had been alive the whole 11 days she was missing. Wade and Danner had moved her between vacant rental units and commercial properties where they knew cameras were limited or disabled. The address written on the photograph, 3127 North 24th Street, was one of those properties. At 10:45 that night, Danner had been expected to transfer Maya there. The photograph pinned inside Melissa's shirt was not a warning sent by a victim. It had been a mistake. That explanation bothered me more than anything elaborate would have. Wade had hidden a packet inside machine 11's upper housing before the laundromat opened that morning. It contained a printed photograph, the address, the time, and several identification cards. The packet was supposed to remain inside the concealed compartment until Danner retrieved it. But the housing seal had failed. Water from the machine's modified supply line entered the compartment during Melissa's wash. The paper photograph slipped through an opening near the drum and became trapped inside her scrub top. Other items entered the washer at different times. Erica Halpern's license, the glove, loose coins, pieces of thread. Machine 11 had not been choosing victims. It had been leaking records. Wade and Danner used the laundromat as a dead drop location because nobody questioned abandoned clothing there. A glove, a backpack, a shirt, a key. People assumed those things had been left by customers. Machine 11's altered cabinet allowed Wade to hide identification, phones, and small personal effects until Danner could collect them. Sometimes, the machine was used to wash clothing belonging to victims, not to destroy all evidence. Commercial washers were poor for that. The purpose was more practical. Remove visible dirt, blood, makeup, hair, or distinctive odors before clothes were stored, discarded, or placed somewhere investigators might find them and draw the wrong conclusion about where the person had been. That was where the title the newspapers gave the case came from. The Missing Person Laundromat. I hated it. It made the whole thing sound clever. There had been nothing clever about Maya's wrists, nothing clever about the list of names read aloud in court, nothing clever about Melissa waking every night because she thought she heard a van door opening. Erica Halpern did not survive. Police found her remains beneath broken concrete in the basement of the North 24th Street property 9 days after the laundromat incident. Her black glove had been kept because one of the men believed a security camera might have captured it during her abduction. They removed it, stored it, forgot it, then moved it through the laundromat months later with other items. The 3 stitched letters near the cuff were not EH. They were EM. Erica's mother had sewn them when the glove belonged to Erica's older sister, Emily. Erica wore hand-me-downs. That small correction appeared in the police report. I read it several times. Maya testified before a grand jury and later at trial. I never met her properly. Riley did. Their first meeting happened in a hospital corridor when Riley was being discharged after surgery to repair the cut in her forearm. Maya's room was on the same floor. Riley said they spoke for less than a minute. "What did you say?" I asked. "Nothing useful." "What did she say?" "Thank you." Riley hated that. She believed gratitude created a debt in the wrong direction. She had been cut, kicked, and nearly killed. But Maya had spent 11 days with 2 men who treated her like an object to move between addresses. Riley didn't want a heroic version of herself placed beside that. She stopped studying criminal justice after the semester ended. For a while, I thought she had quit because the case made the subject unbearable. That wasn't exactly it. "I don't want to spend my whole life arriving after," she told me. She transferred into an emergency management program. She became interested in building safety, evacuation planning, communications failures, things that sounded boring, until you had watched a locked automatic door become a wall. Louis needed 2 surgeries on his ankle. The fracture was worse because he had stood on it to move the fallen steel door. His employer's insurer tried to argue that forcing the door was outside his assigned duties. Louis hired a lawyer, and after 14 months, received a settlement he described as enough to stay angry, not enough to retire. He walked with a cane afterward. The cane had a rubber tip that squeaked on polished floors. Melissa returned to work at the dental office, but stopped using laundromats. She bought a second-hand washer and dryer for her apartment building's basement, even though her landlord charged her for the electrical installation. She kept the scrub top, not the photograph. Police retained that. The shirt. It had a small pinhole near the collar and a bleach stain shaped like a thumbprint. Melissa kept it folded in a plastic bag in the back of her closet. She told me that throwing it away felt like letting someone else decide what it meant. The legal process took almost 3 years. Wade accepted a plea agreement after investigators recovered digital records from the cellular router hidden inside machine 11. The router had stored connection logs, remote commands, and device identifiers. Danner went to trial and blamed Wade for everything. The jury did not believe him. Between them, they were connected to 6 abductions. 3 victims survived. 3 did not. There may have been more. The police never said there weren't. My hand required 2 surgeries. The knife damaged a sensory nerve and 1 tendon. I regained movement in all 5 fingers, but the ring finger and little finger stayed numb along their outer edges. Even now, I can place my hand on a hot mug and not feel the temperature properly. The stab wound in my thigh healed better. The rib fracture healed worse. For months, sneezing felt like being struck from inside. The medical bills should have ruined me. Instead, workers' compensation, a civil settlement, and a victim assistance fund covered most of them. Most remained an important word. I still paid for physical therapy twice a week. I still argued with insurance representatives who used phrases like medically necessary and pre-existing weakness. The bicycle accident had already damaged that hand. Wade's lawyer tried to use that fact to reduce damages. When I heard, I laughed hard enough to hurt my ribs. Midway Wash and Dry remained closed for 11 months. The owner, Martin Kessler, was investigated but never charged. Police found no evidence that he knew about the modified washer or the dead drop system. He had been careless, cheap, and too willing to give contractors long-term access codes. But carelessness was not the same as conspiracy. The building failed multiple inspections. Improper wiring, unprotected outlets, non-compliant door controls, a blocked utility access route, an emergency lockbox whose code had not been changed in practice, despite what Lewis believed. The city ordered extensive repairs. Kessler sold the property. A company from Illinois bought it and renovated the ground floor. The tax office became a phone repair shop. The convenience store remained. The laundromat reopened under a different name. Fresh Spin Laundry. They replaced every machine. I know because I went back. That was 18 months after the trial. I did not plan to enter. I was driving along Lisbon Avenue after a physical therapy appointment when traffic slowed near the bus stop. I saw the new sign, bright blue against the old brick, and pulled over before I could decide not to. Inside, the floor had been rettled. The folding tables were white laminate instead of scratched metal. The ceiling lights no longer buzzed. The room smelled of lemon disinfectant and the warm mineral scent of dryers. A woman sat near the front window reading a paperback. 2 children rolled a laundry cart between the washer rows while their father told them to stop. Ordinary. Almost aggressively ordinary. The new manager was a man named Howard Lynn, 52 male, who wore a navy polo shirt embroidered with the Fresh Spin logo. He recognized my name when I introduced myself, but had the decency not to ask for details. We redid everything, he said. Wiring, plumbing, security, door system too. Good, he pointed toward the ceiling. Cameras store to the cloud now. Good. I walked to the place where machine 11 had been. The numbering had changed. The new washer 11 stood closer to the front windows. It was larger, clean, and painted white around the steel door. I opened it. The drum was empty. Howard watched from several feet away. "You okay?" he asked. Yes. That was not entirely true, but it was close enough for a stranger. I ran my fingers around the rubber gasket. Nothing, no thread, no coins, no glove. I closed the door. On my way out, one of the children pushed the laundry cart into the lost property shelf. A plastic container tipped over. Buttons, keys, earrings, and coins scattered across the tile. The sound stopped me. Small metal pieces turning in circles. One coin rolled farther than the others and struck my shoe. A dark penny. For a moment, I could hear machine 11's end of cycle tone again. 4 clean beeps. I bent and picked up the penny. It was warm from the sunlight coming through the front window. Nothing more. I placed it back in the container and helped the child gather the rest. Howard thanked me. Outside, buses moved along Lisbon Avenue. Someone carried groceries into the convenience store. A delivery driver argued with his phone beside the curb. The world had put itself back together without asking whether I had. I stood beneath the new sign until my hand began aching. Then I went home. I have a washer in my apartment now. A small one, used, nothing fancy. I check the pockets before every load. I check the gasket afterward. I leave the door open so the drum can dry. Sometimes a coin still appears inside, usually a nickel or a penny I missed. I put them in a jar on the shelf above the machine. I don't know why. The jar contains 34 cents. It has contained 34 cents for 6 months. Last Tuesday, I counted again. There were 37. That's tonight's story. If it gives you chills, make sure to like, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and tap the bell so you never miss what's coming next. And if you're still brave enough, there are more dark tales waiting for you right here on the channel. Go watch another if you dare.